Hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to TPUSA Live. Oh, it's one of my favorite days of the week. We're about to head into the weekend, but we got some great content for you before you head out into the weekend and do whatever you're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Jon Root, sitting next to the Magaholic Stephen Davis.
Let's go.
Are you excited about the weekend? What do you got going on?
It's Friday, okay? Friday. I can't get enough of Fridays. Gotta love it. Weekend's coming up. Let's enjoy it.
I love it. Before you go out, once again, we got some good stuff for you. We're starting off with Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. He's the guy to go to break down everything that's going on in the news in a very concise, intellectual way.
Goodness gracious, a wealth of intellect. Goodness, this guy is the go-to. If you want, especially when it comes to foreign policy and things of that nature, this guy has it all. Lord have mercy. Hats off to you.
And if you're not following Jack Posobiec online, make sure you do that as well. He's always keeping you up to date. Yeah. Download the podcast, be one of the millions that have done that, and tune in just about 4 minutes. You're going to get some good stuff from Jack Posobiec. Right after that, sitting down on the couch, not here, but at the Phoenix Convention Center for AmericaFest 2021. We get to relive some of the best moments from there. We had exclusive interviews with some incredible people, incredible patriots, people that are doing incredible work, and I'm trying to see if I can say incredible as many times as possible right now, because that's how good it was.
That's how great it was, yeah.
The first one you're going to see here is a sit-down conversation with Pastor Jack Hibbs, the senior pastor of Chino Hills Calvary Chapel, about what's the role of the church right now? How should the church be looked at by the community? How can they be taking care of everybody? Because too often we are looking to government when we probably should be looking at the church.
That's how I used to start off as, looking at the church, but now we're looking at big daddy government.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
Yeah, and in churches, he's talking about how they need to step up. And he actually took a very courageous stance, kept his church open, especially in a place like Southern California, very difficult place, thinking about all the fines and everything that politicians and leftist politicians were trying to push on churches, trying to keep them closed, while you could just go to Walmart, go to Target, do whatever you want. Also talks a little bit about eschatology, aka end times. I know a lot of people are bringing that up as well, so very interesting conversation. And then James Lindsay, I know he's been on the Charlie Kirk podcast, good friend of Turning Point USA. He is one of the most intellectually witty people I've ever met. That's the way I'm going to coin it.
So he's just like you.
No, you listen to someone like James Lindsay, he will make you laugh, and he will also make you think, wow, I really learned something.
I just learned something today. How about that?
That was fantastic. So it's a great conversation with James Lindsay. Joe Bob and I sit down with him. And then we got Kimberly Guilfoyle. If you are a woman out there watching TPUSA Live, make sure you stick around for that, because she is someone you need to look up to. She is a role model for every female out there, and I think the way she lives her life is very admirable. Also, we got Joe Anglim. Joe Anglim is a TPUSA ambassador. He was on Survivor, get this, 3 times.
Mr. Survivor himself, I am not doing it. I will not do it. I am not going out there. I will not survive. He will survive. That's why he's a man.
I know, every time I watch that show, I'm thinking, I'd like to think that I would last a long time, but I feel like you really find out who people are.
Absolutely.
Especially when you got cameras around, too. It's crazy stuff. But we talk about that, but most importantly, we talk about what he's doing with organizations that are trying to stop sex trafficking, especially with the Super Bowl coming up very soon. Sex trafficking, that is the biggest sex traffic time of the year, and people need to know about it, and they need to get more information, and what he does is pretty incredible. He does that with his wife that he actually met on Survivor.
Oh, you can't beat that. Goodness gracious.
Incredible. I might think about joining Survivor.
Do it.
Right after that, new episode of The Spillover with Alex Clark. She sits down with Abby Johnson and talks about Planned Parenthood's lives. I know Alex Clark and Isabel Brown, they just went out to D.C. for the pro-life march. They're doing a lot of incredible work for that. And then they talk about how can we make sure people have the information? How can people, have the resources to fight back against this stuff, which is basically, in my opinion, genocide happening inside the United States.
100% genocide is not right, it's not okay, but that's why we're going to talk about it, and that's why Alex and Isabel are perfect for that.
And then you're going to get a little bit more Alex Clark after that. Brand new episode of Politics, talk about Euphoria's drug problem. Euphoria, big Netflix show. I have not seen, or at HBO Max, I think that's when it's on. Either way. It's online, and there's a problem.
That's not
and
good.
then I guess Dolly Parton talking about she's had a long marriage, and I guess she's got some sex tips.
From Dolly Parton.
Never really wanted to say that on a live stream, but that's what she's covering. And then I guess Rose Gold's out. that's no longer trendy, Freak of the Week, and so much more. But coming up next, Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. Have a great rest of your Friday. We'll see you soon.
You want to see an example of failed socialism? Go to an Indian reservation.
A lot of the soldiers were very aggressive, so the women did get raped.
Muerte means a place of suffering, dying, starvation, nothing good.
I didn't realize how corrupt things were. I didn't realize what kind of environment we were living in.
We had no running water, we had no power.
They de-incentivize people from, opportunity.
That's why our suicide rate has climbed up astronomical rates. I think that's what I'm also projecting to my people, even if I have to fight you to save you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, powered by Turning Point USA. Today's biggest and top stories. First of all, the president of Ukraine is out slamming Joe Biden after his botched call. Interesting. Next, President Biden is also preparing a shortlist for Supreme Court. We've got the exclusive details. Third, Sweden has decided against recommending COVID vaccines for children aged 5 to 12. And finally, cancel culture's generational divide, a new study printed in City Journal. All of this and more ahead, Human Events Daily. Well, if you've been listening to Western media coverage about the situation in Ukraine, the situation with Russia, you're probably asking yourselves, is Ukraine still on the map? Does Ukraine still exist? Have they taken it? Have they flattened the city out of Kiev? Are the people safe? What is going on? Is the new czar rolling his tanks and troops right across the river and into the heartland, the breadbasket of Europe? Well, see, here's the funny thing about that. There's someone who's responding to all of this coverage, someone who's responding to this completely botched phone call with President Biden, and that is none other than the president of Ukraine himself, Vladimir Zelensky. Take a listen to this at a press conference earlier today.
So activities, some questions, and we are grateful to the United States for their ongoing support to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. But I'm the president of Ukraine. I'm based here, and I think I know the details deeper than any other president. The question is not about the U.S. president, because, well, we do understand what the risks are and which of those risks are priority risks. And we've discussed lots of questions. I would like to explain this a little bit. It's important that the president should know the situation from me, not from the intermediaries. He knows the situation from me personally, and we're talking to each other. We'll have another conversation in a couple of weeks as well. But it's important not only for our intelligence community and secret services to exchange information. People need to be here and understand all the details. I understand you are here. I don't know how long you have been here.
And that's just incredible. It's astounding to me to hear this coming from a world leader, someone who interfaces, literally just yesterday, interfaced with the President of the United States. And if you read between the lines from what Zelensky is saying there, he's essentially saying that Biden is being lied to. So he goes on to say in the press conference that the American media is creating panic. He says, are there tanks on the street? No. Are there people fleeing their homes? No. We are going about our lives. That's what we've been doing since all of this started, which, by the way, was at a higher escalation in 2014, but we weren't getting the coverage. Even in 2021, there was an escalation and we didn't get coverage. But for some reason, Western media is giving us coverage now when they weren't before. Why is that? And he says, he kind of pulls his punch there. He's being careful. He's being a little diplomatic. He says, well, I'm not going to say that President Biden is telling the media to do this in the West or instructing the media to do this. But he catches himself because you can tell that that's what he wants to say, that it sounds to him like President Biden is driving the media coverage. But if you also listen very carefully to the words he's choosing, he says that Biden shouldn't trust the intermediaries. And which intermediaries he's talking about? Well, in the very next segment, he goes and starts talking about the intel agencies and the national security services. So do you read between the lines here? President Zelensky is essentially saying that Biden is being lied to by the intelligence community. He's saying there are people around you, Mr. President. They do not have your best interests at heart. They are lying to you. They are believing their own BS when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Putin, when it comes to all this stuff. They are sending this forward. And then you've got a media out there, which CNN, they went, and I caught Jake Tapper and Natasha Bertrand deleting tweets, deleting videos after the White House put pressure on them over this very call, because they were initially reporting on this call that Biden was talking to Zelensky. It didn't go very well, that they got into a huge disagreement over this thing, with Biden essentially barking at him, saying, oh, the Russians are about to, they're going to sack Kiev, they're going to occupy the entire country, they'll have you down within 2 weeks. And Zelensky saying, no, that's not right. What are you talking about? That's not happening. We're not seeing that happening here. And then telling Biden that he needs to calm down the rhetoric, telling Biden to calm down. No wonder they're sending him out for ice cream. This White House is in complete shambles. And that's why, by the way, the Ukrainians, the Germans, and the French are sitting down right now with the Russians in Paris. They're cutting out the Alzheimer's patient in Washington, D.C., and the guy with the funny hair on that island, Boris Johnson. They're cutting them out. Because here's the dirty little secret. Not in the room, not in the deal. You want to come to the table. Well, continental Europe is saying, look, we've had World War I. We've had World War II. We've had the Cold War, the Napoleonic Wars. Been there, done that. We do not want to go to blows in the dead of winter over this piece of real estate. And Zelensky gets that. And he knows, right? He's being diplomatic because he doesn't want to blow up the relationship with the United States. But he's telling them, I will not be wagged. I am the president of Ukraine. I am based here, not you and not your media. Go pound sand. You'll love to see it. Well, we've got some more information exclusive to Human Events Daily from our White House staffer regarding the situation between President Biden, Vice President Harris, and what exactly is going on with the Supreme Court pick. So we heard, of course, earlier this week, another strange series of events where Supreme Court Justice Breyer, it was reported that he was planning to retire. However, then we found out that he didn't want it reported that he was planning to retire yet, that he wanted to do an announcement, yet that someone had rushed the story. Gee, I wonder who that could have been. You think Press Secretary Psaki is sitting there like one margarita in one hand, the phone in the other. Get me Politico. Give me anything. We need to change the situation. We need to change the headlines. We need to change the talking points. We need to change the news cycle. Ukraine is completely dying on us. Nobody cares. It's all the way over in a part of the world that people can't even find. The borders have been changing for 500 years. What do? Get the Supreme Court justice thing fired up. And of course, the rest of the White House is completely caught off guard. So Human Events can report exclusively from White House staffer that they were not aware that Breyer was planning to retire, because this retirement came out of left field, not even a hint. Apparently, Kamala was asked at one point. She said no. Ketanji Jackson is in the mix, as well as Candace Akawumi, Tanya Chutkan, Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, as well as Aramis Ayala, formerly of Florida's 9th Judicial Circuit, but that is also far. Then you're also hearing people from the Biden side. This is Politico. They have Leonda Kruger, who is of the Associate Justice on the California Supreme Court, and J. Michelle Childs, someone who has spent the past decade as a district court judge in South Carolina, who was appointed by President Barack Obama, as well as Leslie Abrams Gardner, a federal district judge in Georgia, appointed by Obama in 2014. Here's the situation, right? Here's the situation, though. This Supreme Court has already been asked to take up affirmative action. So we know that that's going to be pushed down. That's not going to be decided until next year. President Biden, when he was candidate Biden, pledged publicly. He said, I will choose a Supreme Court justice based on their race and their gender. So we already set those preconditions of identity politics for the person who is picked. So here's the problem with that, and I explained this yesterday on the show as well, that when you have someone that's chosen and you're already expressly told up front, right, the framing of this entire judicial process, of this entire nomination, and of this person's entire tenure now on the Supreme Court, on the bench, is something that our Constitution obviously does not call for anywhere. Nowhere does it say that there needs to be some kind of racial diversity quota on the Supreme Court. The best person for the job, period. That's what it should be. And we should be able to choose somebody with, of course, the advice and consent of the United States Senate who can come through and do the job of being a Supreme Court justice. And now look, I don't personally know any of these justices, right? But I do see people up there like Sonia Sotomayor, who, to put it kindly, I think, is just an example to everyone that anyone, truly anyone, can become a Supreme Court justice, even if you're completely unqualified for the job, like she is, when she's going around telling people that there's hundreds and thousands of children that are hooked up to ventilators because of COVID-19. Just completely insane nonsense that she believes. And then she's gonna go and take that nonsense and put it into her rulings, which affect who? All of the 325 million Americans that are under her judicial watch, under her judicial purview, right? This is not the purpose of the Supreme Court. Now, you can argue, by the way, whether or not the Supreme Court's purpose is to declare something constitutional or not. That's actually something that they decided for themselves later on. But the purpose of the Supreme Court, disputes between states, right? This was obviously a major issue. And then they are doing judicial review. Not one of the original purposes, but it is one of the functions now. So if you're someone that goes there, and maybe one of these women is completely qualified for that, and I'm not saying that because I haven't seen, and I'm going to be very upfront, I haven't gone through and looked at any of the specific choices that they made previously in their decisions. I haven't looked at the cases. I haven't looked at anything other than who appointed them, right, and who's being talked about. Because right now, all we're doing is getting together a shortlist. But I will tell you this. We should be choosing someone for the Supreme Court because they understand the law, because they understand where rights come from, and they understand that the role of government in the United States of America is to protect those rights, period. That's it. That's the entire point of government. Government should not be out there. The Supreme Court should never even be asking the question of medical decisions, right? Is it lawful? Is it not? Is it constitutional? Is it not? That's your job. Your job isn't to go out there, and you hear this when they talk about Roe v. Wade, for example. Well, what about access to abortion? Wait, hold on a second. Why is a Supreme Court judge the one who determines whether or not abortion, kills a human being? Where does life begin? These are not questions that are to be left up to justices who are unelected titans in black robes. These are questions for the American people to decide at the ballot box and through legislation. These are not questions that were ever intended for the Supreme Court, and we need to get out of the business of legislating from the highest court in the land. Well, the name just dropped. Winter Storm Keenan. I've been telling you all week that this thing is coming. Now we've got blizzard warnings issued by the National Weather Service from the extreme southern Delmarva Peninsula to coastal Jersey, Maine, Boston, Portland, Atlantic City, all up and down the East Coast, that I-95 corridor, of course, New York, Philadelphia. Also in the mix on this, Washington, D.C., like myself, is about to be hit, Norfolk, Roanoke, Raleigh, Charlotte, even all the way out to Louisville, Kentucky. Folks, go to mypillow.com. You use promo code POSO now. Protect yourself. Be warm this winter. Go get the beddings, you get the sheets, you get the robes, you get the blankets, the slippers. Just at least get the slippers. You go to promo code POSO, and even if you go, by the way, to mypillow.com/POSO, you can actually find some very special deals. We just updated the site. I talked to the folks over there at MyPillow. We've been able to update that landing page. So mypillow.com/POSO, and then of course use promo code POSO at checkout. You will see fantastic deals. This winter is hitting hard. Make sure that you and your family are prepared for it. And speaking of families, listen to this. Sweden has decided against recommending COVID vaccines for children aged 5 to 11. Wow, that's interesting. I don't remember hearing anyone in the United States saying anything like that. Let's continue. And this is a story out of Reuters. The Swedish Health Agency has said that the benefits do not outweigh the risks. With the knowledge we have today, with a low risk for serious disease for kids, we don't see any clear benefit with vaccinating them, Health Agency official Britta Bjorkholm told a news conference. She added that the decision could be revisited if the research changed. Kids in high-risk groups can already get the vaccine. And then it's talking about the rest. Sweden's government on Wednesday has extended restrictions, which include limiting operating hours for businesses and indoor venues during Omicron through February 9th. Here's the big question, though. Why is it then that in the United States, when you hear the CDC or you hear the CEO of Pfizer, they come out and they say, don't worry about it, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it, it's perfectly fine. But then the Europeans, right, the people that they always point to, when they say, oh, we should follow European healthcare, Bernie Sanders and all the lefties, they say, you gotta follow European healthcare. Okay, well, here's Sweden. And Sweden says that the risks outweigh the benefits for vaccinating children. Explain that one to me. So let's put that up against and see what the CDC director here in the United States, who by the way is appointed by the White House, see what she had to say.
A time for parents to celebrate. We now have vaccine that's eligible for 28 million children between the ages of 5 to 11. We saw the deliberations yesterday at the advisory committee meeting demonstrating the risk to children from COVID and in fact the real efficacy and safety of these vaccines, working in 91% of children, the efficacy of 91%. And importantly, you know, we've taken the time to get this right, to do the science, to have a kids dosing schedule. The dose is about a third of the adult dose. And really, you know, it's taken us almost a year compared to when we had vaccine for adults. So really done the due diligence, reviewed the science.
Celebrate it. Celebrate your vaccination. Celebrate vaccinating your children. Don't worry about those risks. Don't listen to that Swedish health agency. Who cares? You know what's interesting to me though? Do you ever get the sense that when people like Walensky and these other political appointees, when they talk about children, they're not actually talking about, you know, human beings, like actual children. I wake up every morning with my kids, right? I go, you know, usually our 1-year-old gets us up first, and then I go and get up our 3-year-old because he's starting to sleep in a little more. But what's interesting to me though is I'll spend time with them before I hop in the car, head into the studio. And then when I get home, that's the best time of my day, is when I'm with them. We pray, we do the rosary, right? We eat some food together. That's the best time of my day. So when I hear stories like this, or when I hear stories about, you know, talking about sending our sons and daughters to go off and die in the killing fields of Eastern Europe, just so that the elites can talk about this in their parlor games. Oh, our forces are fighting the Tsar in the East, right? You have these people with no meaning and no purpose in their lives, and they're using these crisis theaters like COVID-19 and Russiagate, I think this is Russiagate 3.0, to provide themselves meaning. No, find meaning in family, find meaning in God. Stop trying to put our children at risk. Well, the City Journal has an interesting new study and a report on that study from the Manhattan Institute that's just come out. Eric Kaufman out of Birkbeck College, University of London, who's affiliated with the Center for the Study of Bipartisanship and Ideology. And what it essentially says, there is a generational threat to free expression. Survey data shows that Americans under 30 prize cancel culture itself over liberty. Really? Yes, actually, listen to this. 65% of Americans over 55 opposed Google's decision to fire James Damore for having questioned the firm's training on gender equity. Those under 30 support the firing by a 59 to 41 margin. Similar gaps separate young and old people on similar instances of cancel culture. Whether you look at Gina Carano, who was fired by Star Wars, Brendan Eich, who was fired by Mozilla for opposing gay marriage in 2008. When you look at the people who are younger, it actually says that they support cancel culture more, even if, by the way, and here's what's interesting, here's what's so interesting to me about this. They also say, the data shows, they're worried about being canceled because of one of their remarks or one of the things they've said or done in the past that may now be misconstrued. However, they still support cancel culture if it helps marginalized groups. And this is absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Listen to this. And you look at Gen Z, it's actually increasing. If you look at the millennials, it's of course increasing. So what's going on here? What is actually going on? Well, listen to former President Barack Obama. He even spoke out against cancel culture.
You know, this idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. Yep. People who do really good stuff have flaws. Right. People who you are fighting may love their kids. And, you know, share certain things with you. And I think that one danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses, Malia and I talk about this. Yara goes to school with my daughter. But I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people.
So you have to understand these people believe they're on a moral crusade. By a 48-27 margin, respondents under 30 agreed with the following statement. My fear of losing my job or reputation due to something I said or posted online is a justified price to pay to protect historically disadvantaged groups. Those over 50, by contrast, disagree by a 51-17 margin. So understand this. They're terrified of cancel culture, and yet they continue to support cancel culture at the same time. The problem is, of course, that you losing your job does nothing to help any marginalized group. That's just you losing your job, right? That's you losing your reputation. So you have to understand several things here. But first and foremost, these people are insane. This is a religious belief with them. They actually believe that canceling people from their jobs, canceling people, movies or whatever it is, will somehow help groups that they believe are marginalized because they tell them that they're marginalized. Absolutely fascinating. And that's it. That's all the time we have here on Human Events Daily, your Cliff Notes of today's news. The most high impact, high action analysis and information that you can find anywhere. We are information, not indoctrination. Remember our motto to you: be good, be brief, be gone. Before we leave today, it's time for a very special history break. Today, 1986, the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, which exploded just seconds after takeoff. Because they had a school teacher aboard as one of the crew members, millions of school children in America were watching live while it exploded. President Reagan came out, though, and he said, we are not going to continue pushing forward. We are not going to continue progressing into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission. Lay ashore.
You have to ask the question, how is the most heavily funded tribe have the poorest population?
Listen to me. My country is very because everything problem here. Don't have petroleum for bus and Cuban, for car, for drive, for nothing.
And it sucks. Socialism sucks. There's no other way you can describe it.
This is your brain. This is your brain on socialism. Any questions?
And that is it for us here, Human Events Daily, from the regime-occupied National Capital Region of Washington, D.C. We now turn it over to the free state of Arizona as Turning Point Live continues on the couch. Take it away, John.
Well, once again, welcome to TPUSA Live. We got some fantastic exclusive interviews from AmericaFest 2021. Stephen Davis here. I'm Jon Root. We sit down with Pastor Jack Hibbs, Senior Pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, talking about the role of the church, the founding of America, and so much more. Enjoy. We're back at AmericaFest 2021 at the Phoenix Convention Center in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to talk about faith. You've heard a lot from so many speakers up on the main stage, and now we got our good friend Pastor Jack Hibbs here. How you doing?
Good to see you, John. Absolutely.
Well, I think something we need to start with is, with an event like this, obviously people need to get reminded about our founding.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place to live. It's an absolute privilege to be an American. It's a blessing to be an American. And I think a main reason why we've been so successful and so free and so prosperous is because we were keeping God first for a very, very long time. And part of our foundation was these Judeo-Christian values. How are you talking about that here and reminding people of that?
John, you're exactly correct. It's those values that you put in place that wind up generating the fruit of that discipline. And this is true in business, it's true in farming, it's true in family. And it's certainly true regarding this nation and God. If you put God first, He says in His Word, I will bless obedience. If you forget me, then I'll remove my hand of blessing. And I think America's at a crossroad right now, John. I really do.
And I think it's been at a crossroads for a long time.
Yeah.
Like I remember growing up, maybe a little bit in like junior high, high school, was hearing a little bit more about like, hey, don't pray at school.
Right.
God can just, put Him on the sideline for a second and don't involve Him in your workplace, in your school. And I feel like that was one of the most dangerous things that could have been done, because what is life without God? There's an emptiness, and I feel like that's where a lot of people have felt that, especially over the pandemic when people needed God the most.
I'm so glad you just said that, because I'm old enough to have lived that experience. We had prayer and Bible in public school in Southern California. Then there was summer break. We came back to no prayer and no Bible. And the challenge is, I think George Barna or there's some pollster showed you the radical uptick in violence and just issues in school after the 10 Commandments were removed, after prayer was removed. And I'm not saying that those are magic little recipes. What I am saying is it's the eternal Word of God that anchors the human soul. If we don't have that anchor, John, we drift. And America is adrift.
And I think there's so many people, they put their hope and value and purpose, and they align that with some sort of political party, some sort of politician. And then I think especially too, I know we talked about it before, is we needed more leaders like you, especially when you have government that's trying to tell you like, hey, worshiping your God is not essential right now. It's about health and safety. Like, put that to the side. And it's pretty incredible to see some other pastors and Christians freely listen to government and go along with that. And I think it's where people lost their community and they lost their sense of value, purpose, and hope, really.
On top of that, John, people lost families. Their unit was broken up, not only their church. But, John, this may sound harsh, but I believe it's accurate. And I don't want to be right about this, but I believe 2020 was a shaking, and a lot of stuff that was fluff fell away. People were tested. Everyone was tested. The pulpit was tested. The church was tested. I believe in 2022, God's going to give us one more chance to see if God's men will take the pulpit fearlessly, speak truth, because I don't think the economy is what's going to cause us to come back to life. It is going to be what you said earlier, us getting back to those values that God will honor. And so people need to understand that when they turn on TPUSA, we're not talking about exalting one party over the other. We're talking about getting back to our moral roots. So when people want to fight with us, they're really actually taking on a different worldview of values. That's the issue. We're promoting a return to Christ, a return to the values, the Judeo-Christian values. They work.
So you feel like there's a revival coming? Because it seems like, I know I've watched the Billy Graham documentaries, and they talk about maybe every 60, 70, 80 years there's some sort of revival that needs to happen. And I think that's something we see in the Old Testament too. It's, you have God's people that are provided for so often, but they forget. I think there's times with us in America, we're not owed anything. We're not some sort of new Zion, and we don't deserve this at all. The grace that we're given and the second chances and third chances we're given, but people need to remember, you know, even God's people drifted away. Even the people closest to Jesus, you know, were forgetful.
That's right.
And I think that's something that there's grace and power inside of that.
Here's why you and I can make that case. This nation was founded upon the Judeo-Christian worldview value that we first read about in the Mayflower Compact. If we study the vision of the Pilgrim Fathers, okay, and read in their own writings what they wanted to accomplish, what they accomplished, you and I are enjoying the fruit of it. So if we're going to have our nation get back to its roots, we got to get back to those foundations. No building, no structure works without a foundation. And that's simply what we're saying at TPUSA, and what we're preaching from our pulpits is a return to what works. And if you want to argue in the realm of science, I would love to see our nation return to real science. Well, I would love our nation to return to the real Word of God.
Well, everybody tries to, I mean, especially I would say everybody on the left tries to separate science from the Word of God. And just science from Christianity, science from religion. But those work together.
Perfect.
And then how do you explain that to people?
Because the author of science is the author of life.
Amen.
The author of life, he announces that he's the God of creation. Creation is science. And look, because God's true, science is true, real science, and his word is true. And there is this, and that should cause everybody to think that there is an intercourse between the spiritual realm and the physical realm that should make everyone think. Science doesn't explain away God. Science answers what God has done.
And then I think one of my favorite passages in 1 Peter is talking about always be prepared to share like the hope that you have. And I think we're going into a battle every single day. And we talk about that, whether I have a politician sit here or a pastor like you or anybody that's just attending this event, they feel like they need to be on guard. And that's something that we're told in the Word of God that, hey, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. Sure, there's people in power that we don't align with or agree with, but there's this spiritual enemy it feels like people need to be prepared for. How do you prepare people for that?
The number one way to prepare for that is to actually read the Bible. I mean, Americans, it's told that we own more Bibles than any other nation on earth. Read it. Like, pick it up, just pick up and read the Bible and watch it speak to you. This is the amazing thing about the Bible. The Bible is the book that when you think you're reading it, it's actually reading you. And what's awesome about it is, if we return to the Bible, we're going to find out there's answers for our marriage. There's answers for us parenting. There's answers for us in our struggles. America has been conditioned to pop a pill instead of turning to a chapter. And I would just like to encourage everyone, try turning to the book and watch what God says. It's alive. The Bible is alive, and it has the answers to life.
I'm going to ask you a tough question. I think this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit, because obviously at an event like this, we think about the left could never put on something like this. The left wants to be their own God. They're going to tell you what truth and morality is, and the goalpost is constantly going to shift. But specifically in the conservative realm, when people are considering themselves a Christian or they're running on that sort of platform, how do we keep them accountable and say, hey, if you're going to be preaching this, we need to have you practicing this as well? And how do you empower them to make sure, hey, if you're going to say this, like, you're going to be judged harsher than other people. If you're going to want to be a leader in this political realm, a leader in the spiritual realm, here's how I'm going to keep you accountable. And it's a big deal when you say, hey, I pronounce myself as a Christian.
John, this is exactly the key, and we practice this at our church. We have had the opportunity over the years to send people to Congress from our congregation. We vet them, meaning we ask them questions and we watch them, and we make sure that what people say, that they do. And I often say this, regarding the political realm and government, look at someone's voting record. You don't need to even listen to what they say. Look at their voting record. So if someone says, well, I'm very conservative or I'm very pro-family, but then they vote or they do things that destroy the family, that they're tearing down Judeo-Christian worldview values. It's what they do that speaks louder than what they say. So what we do is that we make sure that we hold their, as it were, feet to the fire. And we make them very clear to understand, this is why we're supporting you as a congregation. This is why we're behind you. But the fact of the matter is we're going to be watching you. And I can tell you that our elected officials, 4 of them right now are in Washington, they will often report back, pray for me. This is what's confronting me. I need God's wisdom. This is where we get back to. This republic is still we the people. And notice, you and I talk about the republic. The other team likes to talk about a democracy. There's a big difference there. One promotes a Judeo-Christian biblical worldview. The other one won't even mention God in their platform.
Well, they're trying to take it out of their prayers in Congress. They're trying to take it out of our founding documents. They're trying to take it out of everything. They've already taken it out of schools, like we talked about. And another thing too is Jesus bridged the gap better than anyone else. And there's times where I'm thinking, why do we look to flawed people in the past, where I think we can learn from our past quite a bit. We can learn from old pastors or old politicians. But when we look to Jesus, he bridged the gap. He went to the tax collector's house and ate with somebody.
I love it.
And when you look at a situation like that, historically, that was basically saying, hey, you accept their lifestyle, but Jesus changed that and flipped tables, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And so how do you think we can start bridging the gap a little bit more? Because I know for me, even on the sports side, where I can sit down and I can talk to Enes Kanter Freedom, I don't agree with everything that he has to say. I don't agree with his whole being, but at least there's a bridging of the gap, and sitting down at the same table would say, hey, I agree with this here. How can we come together as a nation?
I think the key is dialogue. I believe God invented dialogue. And if we could just say to that person, hey, let's sit down and talk about things that are valuable to you and valuable to me, and let's try to understand each other better. Because what you just said, John, is so right on. You're mentioning Jesus bridging the gap. As soon as you said that, I thought of King David. King David was God's man who failed miserably.
Yes.
And yet he was still God's man. And I think Christianity fails when we project this holier than thou image that the world out there, they won't even come to us because they already think that we're going to judge them for being who they are. We are just like them, but for the grace of God. And they need to know about that grace that you and I have come to know. And so, man, I hear you. I think dialogue is going to be the key, and we need to be the ones that instigate it, because I think they think we're going to beat them up. We don't want to beat them up. We want to love them up.
Yeah. And then that love, too, there's a biblical love I think we need to stick to. And that biblical love is sticking by a biblical truth. And right now, the world's going to try to tell everyone, like, here's what real love is. Like, love is love.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is love here. We have it in the Word of God, and it might be in, I hate using this phrase, but inconvenient truth for some people. Yep. But it's the truth. And that's how we can really love people, is by telling them the truth and giving those tough truths.
It's awesome what you just said, because last Sunday, just in the sermon last Sunday, it came up regarding love. And I was speaking to, there's quite a bit of young people in the audience. And I said, how do you know if you're really loved or if you love somebody? And there's about an 18 to 24 month period of infatuation, which is normal. A lot of biology, a lot of chemistry, all of it's normal. But you really don't know if you're loved or you love somebody until it's qualified. How is love qualified? By suffering, by putting up with, by contending. Look, when that loved one is sick or something's wrong, that's when real love shows up. Jesus Christ is that real love, and that's why we can love those who disagree with us.
How do we continue to thank God for being persecuted for our faith? Because a lot of people, they have to get so used to being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Because we are called to be countercultural. And we're going to get persecuted for our faith. And there's a lot of people here, it's like, oh, you're going to get persecuted for your conservatism or whatever it may be. But, you know, that's not going to help your relationship with Christ, is how you're voting, or if you're fiscally responsible, or whatever it may be. It's like, no, if you're sticking to these values, the world's going to tell you that you're not really loving people well.
John, everybody on this interview that's watching right now should know that you and I did not rehearse this. You just asked me a question that has been a 3-year journey in my life. I have been praying for 3 years, Lord, make me the most loving person that you can possibly make me to be. And I believe God had spoken back to my heart. But Jack, if I do that, then you'll be the most hated person also. And that is true. Jesus said, if you're like me, you're going to be loved and you're going to be hated. Why is that true? Because it comes down now to reflecting value. Jesus is the apex, the epitome of value. The more I'm like Jesus, the world who hates those values will want to crucify me. Jesus said, rejoice when you're hated. They're not hating you. Jesus said, they're hating me, which is the character of Christ. In a weird way, John, they're actually giving me a thumbs up that I'm acting like Jesus when I love my enemies as I should.
And when we look to the Bible, we see how God used people that we just could never imagine. Saul to Paul, situation like that. It's basically like an ISIS leader. That's how we could.
That's right.
Just try to compare and contrast that situation where he was killing Christians, but God used him to be one of the most mighty missionaries in the history of the entire world. So with an event like this, do you think it could help really empower somebody to start getting into the Word and start aligning with Christ and say, hey, God doesn't care about your past. He cares about your future and how you can use that past to inspire you to be a better person and start living your life for Him.
Absolutely true, because there's something that you and I know about people who don't have Christ in their life or that they're walking with Christ, and that is there's an emptiness. There's something inside of the human heart that says there's more to life, or I need to know what's going to happen to me after I die, or am I on the right foundation? Is there something wrong? Look, if you've got to sweat and labor to keep your team together, something's wrong. Here's the cool thing about following Jesus. Jesus is the one who keeps the team together. You and I don't have to sweat it out. We don't have to push the brick up the hill. He's doing it all. So he reveals to people in their hearts, I need truth. Jesus said it this way, my sheep will hear my voice, they'll follow me.
How do you tell the Peters of the world that desperately just try to they have a death grip on the wheel and they're saying, hey, God, I know you're telling me to let go, but I'm going to try to do this myself and I'll let you know if I need help.
This is where history helps us greatly. Look back at your history and see how you've been doing as you've controlled your life. As you've had the wheel, look at what you've done and the dilemmas you have been victimized by and come to the point to realize what is called just full surrender, if you ask me, is, okay, Lord, I'm giving you the decision-making process to your hands. I'm going to give that to you. You say, Jack, that's nuts. I know it sounds nuts, but it's not. This is how it works. Jesus, I'm giving you the controls of my life. As you read the Bible, He will direct you and instruct you. He'll talk to you from the Word. And look, John, I'm 64 years old. I've been a Christian since I was 19 years old.
You're 64 years young, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you. My wish is, I wish I wouldn't have waited till I was 19. I should have followed Christ sooner.
Then how do you use that experience and that story to inspire some of the young people here? Because you took the stage and you said, hey, this is what you should be expecting from yourself. This is what you should be expecting from your pastors, because there's a lot of woke ideologies they're trying to insert into the church. There's a lot of worldly things they're trying to tell you basically to eisegesis the Bible here. Read that surface level, whatever you think it is, that's what it is. It's your truth. So how are you inspiring the next generation and basically other pastors to stick to this biblical foundation?
Walking over here to this interview, two young ladies stopped me and said, Pastor Jack, we watch you online. We wound up joining a home Bible study group, and we've been reading books that you feature as your books of the month. Various books on faith, American history, world history. These are two young people that I'm going to guess are in their young 20s. What's happened to them? They made the comment, they're learning more about their country by what we're giving them to read than what they've learned in school. The point is, educate yourself with the truth. And it's there. You just need to know where to look. And Charlie, you, Turning Point, that's what we're about.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, this morning I had a real chance to kind of sit back and look at all these photos, videos, all the content from AmericaFest. And there was a theme surrounding so many different speakers. Even the sports panel that I had was people were directing people to Christ. Lauren Bobart was doing that. You were doing that. Steve Weatherford, Cameron Haynes, Michael Chandler, so many people. They get this massive platform here. It's across the nation. It's on Fox Nation, and people are deciding, hey, I could try to get some more political clout here, or I could try to grow my brand. But a lot of people are saying, hey, all glory to God that we're able to have this event. Even country artists, I know, like people like Russell Dickerson. He's worked with Chris Tomlin to put together an amazing gospel album.
Right. No, I mean, this is incredible because I think when you come to the reality of it, all things pass away. God is eternal. His truth's eternal. And when you hear from people that you're referring to, they've come to realize, wait a minute, a lot of things are shifting and moving. And I have found in the earthquake, I'm from Southern California, I get to say this, when the earth moves, it doesn't matter what you grab onto, it's moving with the earth. The reason why you're not afraid is because you've got an internal anchor. You know that, hey, God's got this. God's got this. And that's why we default to him. That's where we go to. He's not going to move.
My final question for you is actually, I got a couple. Number one, a lot of people have tried to talk about end times quite a bit. And I think a lot of people I think sometimes people have this skewed view of America, like we're some sort of new Zion, like we deserve to be saved. And just because we're the freest, most prosperous place on earth, that we are owed something. So how do you remind people that, hey, even God's chosen people, they steered away and God still had judgment on them. So how do you tell people that, hey, you're not owed anything from him?
My goodness, thank you. It's so very simple. Number one, Israel was given the oracles of God, the Bible says, the word of God, to tell the nations. Isaiah the prophet said, God gave you guys, the chosen people, his word to tell the nations. Now you've got the United States that has enjoyed more and the best of everything. For what? To put our feet up or to go on a cruise? No, it is this, to tell the nations, not about the US dollar, to tell the nations that they can know the love of God through Jesus Christ, that you can start life over again. This is what concerns me, John. If we don't get back to shouting from the housetops what really matters about our nation turning back to its founding, this is what's unique about America. We don't have to preach that something might be. We get to preach about what has been. Go back to those foundations. That's the answer. It doesn't matter how rich you get. It doesn't matter what platform or brand you have. All that's going to dissolve. But Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Final question for you is, how are you going into 2022 as we speak right now, going into being a shepherd of a flock, telling people, hey, we've gone through a lot over the past few years. A lot of people have gone through a lot their entire life. And do you have a specific goal going into 22 that you feel like God is telling you? I feel like sometimes I love the New Year's resolutions. This last year I had a specific word. It was encourage. And I tried my best to encourage people. I failed wildly. But is there one specific goal that you're trying to get to, being a leader of a flock there?
Yes, it's clarity. Clarity. This is where we're going in 2022. In the Bible teaching and the expositional teaching at our church and on our messages, televised and radio. It's clarity. Why? Because God told Daniel, as we get near to the end of days and time is over, it will be more clear. So that's my commitment, to make the Bible able for a 5-year-old who's sitting in the front row to a 99-year-old man in the back row, clarity concerning the Word of God. I believe that I've got God's heart on that. I believe that God will answer that commitment because he wants people to know truth.
Well, we're going to continue to pray for you because I think we need more pastors like you, Pastor Jack. And I think people need to get so used to being uncomfortable because it's a very uncomfortable time. But honestly, it's going to be worth it because we got a pretty nice home we're trying to get to. This isn't it. So thanks so much for everything you do.
God bless you, John.
Thanks.
Well, that was a fantastic conversation because I know a lot of people right now are thinking that whole eschatology talk, the end times. Are we seeing bits and pieces of that now? And he had a great response to that, and especially to the role of the church. I feel like too often we are relying on the government when we should have churches taking care of our communities.
That used to be the way it went, where churches would take care of the communities instead of people relying on the government. They relied on the church. And we need to get back to that, and I think that society would be a lot better for it too.
Yeah, so thankful for Pastor Jack Hibbs. Coming up next, we got James Lindsay. He's a cultural critic, and he talks about how everything is race, gender, and identity. He's probably one of the cheekiest guys on Twitter. He is an absolute brainiac, and it was a very fun conversation. Joe Bob and I sat down with him. Check it out. We're back at AmericaFest 2021 at the Phoenix Convention Center in Phoenix, Arizona. We've had some fantastic interviews, and we got another good one for you, joined by a friend of the program. You might have seen him on Daily Caller Live. He's a TPUSA ambassador. Joe Bob, what's going on, brother?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Living the dream. James Lindsay is on the show now. Welcome to TPUSA Live.
Hey, guys. Geeked about this.
Let's go.
So, John, I've been a fan of James Lindsay since the Grievance Study Project. Is that the right term?
Affair.
Affair.
Grievance Study is affair. It's so intriguing.
So what that was
spicy too. That's what I like.
is James Peter Boghossian, Helen Pluckrose decided to submit a bunch of phony papers, completely fake, about super woke topics, and they got accepted. So the question I have for you is, what is the most ridiculous thing that you guys got into actual university publication?
You know, probably the craziest one was we claimed that by watching dogs hump each other at dog parks and see how people react to it, that you could figure out something about rape culture, and then you could train men the way that you train dogs, literally like using dog manuals to combat rape culture. That not only got accepted, but was given an award for excellence in scholarship by the offending journal, which is called Gender, Place, and Culture.
Well, that's what's so interesting now is we're trying to figure out a difference between reality and satire. That's why it's so prophetic. The Babylon Bee, they're like another prophecy fulfilled in situations like this, where no, it's not just making it into a publication, it's actually getting awarded.
No, that's right. And it was prophetic, too. There was a case a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't know, where there was some dog incident at some park, and somebody called the police, and it was like, it's a dog rape, and then the guy was like, stop it, don't call the police. And then it was like, well, you support rape. It was like, it really kind of came true.
Oh my God.
We live in a clown world. That's where it's just like...
Well, and you have the chief exposer of the clown world right here. What is the most ridiculous actual thing from a serious publication? So obviously you guys were, I don't want to say joking around, but you made fake studies. What's the most ridiculous serious one that you've seen?
I mean, if you want to stick in ridiculous, you know, there's one, and I don't know why it sticks out in my memory, but it's by a guy named Brian Pronger. I remember the guy's name. It's from the 90s, late 90s. The title of the paper, I'm sorry, is really Out of My End Zone. That's the real title. And it says that the whole reason that men play team sports like football is so that they can basically discharge secret repressed homosexual urges in a male accepting environment.
I think that's true.
And again, Out of My End Zone is the title. It's funnier now, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we found out in the preseason that the football is gay. I know
Apparently.
They did say that.
Yeah,
the NFL said that they
that's
are
right,
gay.
they said that.
Yep.
And so that's prophetic too, but that wasn't us.
But another thing I know you focus on, and it seems like everything is boiled down to race, gender, identity.
That's right.
Why is that so dangerous?
Well, it's on its own, identity is dangerous because it's so difficult to change, right? It's so immutable, it's so personal. I actually did some research on where conversations break down a number of years ago, and it says that they kind of take place on different levels. Conversations are what happened, what's the facts. Then below that, there's the emotion. Somebody got their feelings hurt, and the conversation derails. But deeper than that is identity issues. You just can't, even have a discussion across the difference where identity gets offended. So dragging it into identity politics like that breaks any possibility for common ground, any possibility to understand each other. What makes it really dangerous, though, is that this identity politics is actually adapted from Marxism. They've taken the Marxist frame, which is to say there's a stratification, one above, one below, white, black, rich, poor, whatever it is, and that those are intrinsically in conflict with one another. And that's what's so dangerous. It's stoking identity-based conflict, which then has no easy resolution.
Well, and those things are rooted in critical theory. And that's something that you push back on quite a bit and make sure people know the truth about these divisive ideologies that are being thrown into not only schools, not just colleges, but elementary schools. It's in the workplace. It's everywhere. And they want you to think about, you look at yourself in the mirror, that's who you are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This comes out of the critical theory, which developed in response to, it turns out Marxism stabilizes itself when you unleash it on a liberal society. People agitate for economic reforms. They want monopolies busted up. They don't want trusts. They want worker protections, consumer protections. They start to get it, and then they're not radical anymore. They're like, yeah, I can work for my own, and my life's pretty good. I can build a better life, and actually the life's pretty good. I get to watch the game, I get to drive my Corvette, or whatever. I work hard, I have a house, family. And so what they realized, that the critical theorists or the critical Marxists realized, was that you actually, in the working class, have a self-stabilizing force. They get some changes and everything's better. So where they said there would be no stabilization is if they moved into identity politics in the 1960s. They said that we have to look into and this is the words of Herbert Marcuse himself, look at the ghetto populations, the feminists, the sexual minorities, the outcasts, and the unemployed, and those people are going to be the basis for our revolution.
So you're smart enough to break down Foucault, Bell, Marcuse, but a lot of your college students aren't necessarily going to refute any of that sort of stuff. How then, what's the best way that you think is, I guess, in giving students a defense against crap like that without having to be as intellectually gifted as you?
No, I mean, it's actually not that hard, skepticism of the whole program is the best way to do it. I've heard from many, young college-age students that, just saying, I don't know about this stuff, and then you start having a conversation. Yeah. Some of it okay, but it goes way too far. People start opening up, me too, I thought I was the only one. That's a huge kind of experience that I've run into a lot over the last couple of years. And so just by opening up that conversation, then you can start to point out to where it gets ridiculous. Like we were talking just before we started about my Indian friend who's a doctor who went to a cardiology conference. His parents are Indian. He's an Indian American guy, and he was told he's the wrong kind of diversity. And they had the pie chart, and they said, look how racial demographics are getting so bad in medicine. And it was like the old chart showed all these races in a pie chart, and then the new chart showed white, black, and Hispanic. And he was like, where am I? They're like, you're white now. And he's like, brown, And so these kinds of absurdities, get people to realize that something's really stupid about the way this is being done. Even if the stuff they're saying points at stuff that's true, it's like it's obviously making people worse. It's making people fight. It's alienating people. It makes, I had a friend tell me about his gay sensitivity training he had to go through at work. And then like everybody at the office had to ask him about his sex life because they were all weird after that forever. It made it a hostile working environment for him. And so those kinds of things are relatable and say, well, even if I don't understand it, it's clear like something's off here, right? Yeah. And people understand, they feel that. They know something's not working.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's total violations now with just people's private lives, especially now you're trying to tell people that their body's basically not their own. Your workplace and the government can tell you what to do with your body, and there's no freedom inside of that. So when you have people telling you like, all right, well, we like diversity, but we basically need to break it down to white and black. That's it. And then we're going to tell you who matters. That's it. And I feel like that's where you have a society where you have the left pretend to care about these people, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, it's just not the truth.
Yeah, well, I hate to put it so bluntly. Well, no, I don't. I like to be blunt. They're using these different identity categories, whether it's the sexual minorities, whether it's women through feminism, whether it's the racial minorities, as it were. They're using them as props for their ideology. The only people who count as authentically black, look at Larry Elder, for example, the blackface of white supremacy when he ran for governor. The only people who count as authentically black are critical race theorists who say what black people are supposed to say according to critical race theory. They call this a unique voice of color. And so what they're actually doing is they're delegitimizing any voice except for what accords with their politics, which means when the person happens to look the way that there's matches the theory, they're using that person's skin color as a token. They're actually tokenizing the people. They're actually using the people as political props for their agenda. Look at defund the police. It's supposed to be an initiative for black lives, and murder rates in mostly black neighborhoods have skyrocketed. It's not about black lives.
You even had the mayor of San Francisco finally admit
finally
the mayor that is feeling the spirit. I'm telling you, Tony was there.
Tony was playing John. She's exempt from all things when Tony is playing.
But yeah, finally they're bringing up this is a bad idea. And then too, I couldn't imagine going to school to be a social worker, and then you're now being told that we're probably going to send you in the front lines.
Yeah.
That reminds me of just old warfare where you'd have people go out there, the drummer boys, and you have no weapons whatsoever, right. And then you're telling social workers hopefully you can figure it out.
Best of luck.
And hopefully you tone it down, be like, hey, can you stop being so emotional? Maybe put that stolen item back, or maybe that gun's not a good idea, don't use it, and you're putting them in harm's way. It's absolute ridiculousness.
So send them to domestics, which are like, if you talk to any police officer, one of the worst things to get called on, a domestic dispute. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You don't know who's actually in the wrong. You got people fighting with massive emotions. They're going to send social workers into domestic violence disputes. Imagine, for the Jacob Blake experiment. He's got a knife. He's going for a gun in the van or whatever he said. The cop shoots him or whatever. Imagine if there's a social worker trying to bring knife-wielding, angry, off the handle at the moment Jacob Blake down. That social worker.
Yeah. Now, would you categorize yourself as more of a right-leaning conservative? Because I don't think you did, at least when I first started getting to you. And if you didn't, what were you then, and what would you call yourself now? I don't really like labels. Labels are for soup cans.
Sure, yeah.
But how would you identify where you started and where you've now kind of become?
I've always wanted to keep a streak of independence.
Yeah.
And I'm not really interested in politics qua politics.
Yeah.
So, I put apolitical on my Twitter bio and make people mad. But the truth is, I was left-leaning, generally liberal, atheist, the whole 9 yards. And I don't think of myself as conservative now, and I listen to a lot of the conservative things, and a lot of it I agree with, and a lot of it I don't agree with. I've been very happy to listen and learn, and listen and learn. For the last year and a half or 2 years or so, being in close contact. But I still consider myself largely independent. But I will say that I continually find myself using the pronoun "we" when I talk about conservatives now. So something might be shifting behind the eyes. I don't know.
Whether or not you want it to.
I'm not meaning it to. My view is I'm going to be me. I'm going to say what I think is true. And wherever you want to categorize me, that's your business.
Well, that's what people can appreciate, too, is an authenticity.
Yeah.
And then you're someone, too, that, people might not agree with you, but at least you'll sit down at the same table and you'll talk to those people, have some civil discourse.
I had an experience on this trip here to Phoenix where I went out to dinner and I know you shouldn't judge by appearance, but I'm going to bet that the server was extraordinarily left progressive in his politics.
Was it the rainbow mask?
There were a number of things. just a guess. But we got talking about the beer at the place. We got talking about the food at the place. And, we're totally like, you would have bet if you were watching, you're like, oh, these guys are going to go hang out right after this. Like, we had totally like a thing going. I love to talk to people. And there's so much stuff that doesn't have to get dragged into that frame.
Yeah.
Like, totally different people, totally different perspective on the world. But man, that beer is awesome, and we really like this food, and this is real stuff. Oh my gosh, this is so good. I'm so glad I was like, well, he's like, what do you want? Well, I'm kind of feeling, I don't know. And he's like, I got you. It's going to be this. Like, predicted the perfect meal for me. So we were on like a wavelength. Totally sit down with that guy and hang out.
That's what I loved about Tucker Carlson's speech, where it's like, politics don't need to be involved in absolutely every part of your life. Sure, the left wants it to be, and they want you to think about your gender, your identity, your race, and everything, but you should be able to go to a bar, just go to a random place, and be like, wow, I talked to this guy about IPAs for 45 minutes, and we didn't get into anything about inflation, supply chain crisis, blah, 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 blah. And it's fulfilling because we almost need that just dead, empty mind time and not feel like obviously we should always be prepared for like any sort of fight at any time, but we need to go in there where it's like, you know what, I feel like I can just have a conversation about beer or food with somebody and feel like I had a good night.
There should be so many, it's mentally healthy, psychologically healthy, socially healthy to have mostly politically neutral spaces where you keep it out. The personal is political is a feminist idea. It's the worst idea that's ever been introduced into the American body politic. The personal is not political. The personal is personal. And the less you make it everything into politics, the more space there is for common ground, for sharing, to get to know one another, to find that common sensibility across whether it's food or whether it's beer or whether it's, the game or whatever. Yeah. There's all these spaces that have been politicized. We mentioned football a few times that never should have been. Yeah. And, that's the sad part is it's a deliberate agitation by people who know that if they politicize everything, they poison everything. Yeah. So, yeah, it's totally healthy to have apolitical, non-political spaces and times that you spend with one another, regardless of who you are, in neighborhoods and communities and churches and schools and clubs and youth groups, whatever it is. Yeah. It's so important and healthy.
And then the final question for you is, an event like this, like AmericaFest, where it's different than a lot of people have gone to places like CPAC. They've gone to our other events like the Student Action Summit. People have been to the Young Women's Leadership Summit. And you come to a place like this and you almost have some of those escapes. Yeah. You have some of those where I can go and watch a country concert. And obviously you have those country artists on stage that love this country. and they're unapologetic about it. But you can go and just listen to some good music about riding a horse, drinking beer, and hanging out with your buddies. So why do you feel like an event like this is so helpful for trying to get people away from politics, changing the culture for good?
Well, you know what, I will tell you that this is probably the best conference, or my favorite conference I've ever attended.
Wow.
And so I'm really excited about AmericaFest. It has that same kind of strong, fun turning point vibe that I've run into at the Student Action Summits that I've been to, but it's not a Student Action Summit. So it's not like every other person I meet is 20, right, or 19. It's like their parents are here, and there's, you know, a lot of parents were here. I was speaking, and when I gave my panel presentation, I spoke to parents mostly, and Charlie was like, you know, the parents in the audience want to know. So it's a very different vibe, and I'm talking to adults, talking to people across, you know, kind of the entire professional spectrum. Most of the people here are conservative. Most people want to talk politics, etc. But it's this very welcoming, pro-America space that isn't just focused on young people or students or some niche issue. It's America as a big picture. And so it's really been, I think, the best conference I've attended, period. And I've been to a couple CPACs. I've been to that was an experience in and of itself. As a liberal going to CPAC, liberal atheists walk into CPAC, it's a joke, right?
I have one more quick thing. You're like the front line of defense on the CRT Twitter war front. And again, I was talking to you earlier, the amount of engagement and interaction is off the charts unbelievable. For me, that's super taxing. Do you see yourself running out of gas at any point with this sort of thing? Or is this something that you're going to be able to continue to do for, I don't know, however long it takes?
This is going to sound absolutely bonkers to you. But you know, like, so I talked to Madison Cawthorn the other day.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, I listen to your podcast. He's like sitting there, I'm talking to him. He's like, I listen to your podcast. I come home, I put on the podcast, and I put on my Fortnite or my video game, and I just have to, like, you know, mental downtime at night for a little while before I wind down and go to bed or whatever. Believe it or not, Twitter is my mental downtime. I love the give and take of it. I mean, some people, it sounds arrogant to bring it up, but I feel like people, it's kind of true.
Funny
people
you call
have
that
said,
downtime.
I know.
You're like so engaged.
That's so taxing for
people have called me like the Neo of Twitter. So imagine like you plugged into the Matrix and you're like, I know Kung Fu. And you're like jumping like across buildings. It's fun.
Yeah.
I get to go in there and bend the rules and do all kinds of fun stuff and play with stuff. And I had to learn the hard way. I don't take any of it personally.
Yeah.
I don't even think about a tweet usually after I make it. 5 minutes later, it's down the river. It's gone. I think of it as a river of information. It's just gone. So it's actually like my playtime is to go screw around with other tweets and goof off and make jokes and kind of like banter around with people that I know or whatever. So it's actually, like I tell my wife all the time, it's like that's where I rest my mind is when I go on Twitter.
I'm going to the Twitterverse, honey. I'll be back in a couple hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, well, first rule of thumb, never put anything on social media you're not willing to see made fun of. And if you'll make fun of it yourself, even better. So you take yourself seriously.
There you go.
I love it. I feel like that's a great way to end. James, Lindsay, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys. It was awesome.
Like we were telling you before you just saw that interview, everything has just come down to race, gender, and identity. And James Lindsay always has a great response because we talk about it all the time here at Turning Point USA. You heard a lot of speakers at AmericaFest just say, stop complaining, actually do something about it. And then he responds in a humorous way most of the time.
I can't. There's too much talk about this type of foolishness. I wish we can get away from that and start focusing on the content of character as opposed to color of skin, like Dr. Martin Luther King said, but I guess we can't in this day and age. Lord,
what a concept, huh?
What a concept.
I wish we could get back to
I wish we could.
Okay. My goodness. Coming up next, we got Kimberly Guilfoyle talking about Gen Z and the role of parents. It's a great little conversation. Here you go.
Hi guys, I'm Erin Elmore, live from AmericaFest Turning Point USA with the commie fighter herself, Morgan Sagers, and a very special guest. She's done everything under the sun to help the conservative movement, Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with you guys. And I got to tell you, these events have always been fantastic, but I think this one is actually particularly like over the top in the best way. Just seeing the enthusiasm, the crowd out there, having just gotten off stage. People are really fired up, and I love it because you could come out of this last election and be really bitter and just say, I give up, and this is outrageous, and they're always going to cheat. They're always going to do these things. Or you could say, you know what, we're going to fight. We're going to do it better. We're going to do it smarter, and we're going to make sure that we win. And we can't do it without the youth movement here, and that's why I think it's so important what Turning Point does in terms of getting the information out there, getting all of the people to get in front of each other, like-minded, to say there's strength in numbers, that we can do this. And I love it. Everywhere I go, I walk and there's like young people, adults, all of the above saying, hey, we love what you guys are doing and keep fighting. And so it's wonderful. And, you know, the president hasn't stopped at all. He's like the Energizer Bunny. So I've been all across the country with him. And the enthusiasm, you know, from people, and especially some people that didn't even support him before, are like, oh, we should have supported you because we see now what's happening with Joe Biden.
I mean, I hear that all the time. I would say most people love this because there's thousands of students here, and they all leave this conference and then go out to their own communities, to their campuses, more reinvigorated to start the fight up again. What's your biggest piece of advice for the students that want to start helping and be a part of this change?
You know, quite honestly, I always meet people like, oh, well, you know, my son, my daughter, they want to be involved. And I said, well, you get involved with Turning Point. You say, like, make a chapter at your school if you don't have one already. Because otherwise, you had so many students that were in classes, like thinking, maybe am I the only one? And professors targeting them, or the indoctrination. Those students that aren't, you know, in school but want to be a part of this and be part of this patriotic movement, you know, you've got to go and join your local chapters. That's what I say. You got to get involved. Show up for a meeting. Show up for one of these conferences. Actually hear the people speak. Inform yourself about the viewpoint so you can go back out into your community and advocate.
Right. So we talk so much about the kids. I know you're a mom and I'm a mom. Yes. What advice do you give to the parents? Because we see indoctrination in almost every school, whether it's high schools or colleges, even young kids on the Cartoon Network, I see it these days.
It's crazy. You have to be so, like, you and I were very, very, you know, vigilant. We're on it 24/7. Okay?
Really?
Like,
oh,
what's
yeah.
happening?
There's no passive parenting anymore.
It's crazy. You can't. It's no passive parenting. So, and we're helicopter parents. Let me tell you something. You kind of better be. Because you need to see what your kids are reading, what assignments are being sent home, what's being taught in the classrooms. We hear some teachers trying to espouse, you know, CRT and etc. But if you don't get involved and say something, you know, you're just being complicit in it because you're allowing it to happen. So you can't be afraid to, like, stand up and stick up to the schools. I mean, you know, whether it's public school or private school, like, you have an obligation to the student body and to your child. And I think when you show leadership like that, you find so many other parents feel the same way you do, and there's strength in numbers. But it takes one to be able to go forward, to say something, because that's how it starts with the revolution.
Right, and I tell the moms, run for school board, run for city council. The moms are the ones that are going to change the world.
Right,
the moms that are, I think they're going to change the 2022, 2024. It's the moms at home.
I think so. Whether it's school choice issues or indoctrination or CRT, all of the above, or pushing, you know, trans curriculum. These are things that, you know, parents should be able to teach their children and talk to them about issues. That's what parenting is about.
Right.
Schools shouldn't be brainwashing or force-feeding children things that are the purview of the family. So I think that's important. And believe it or not, you said something really important. School boards, you know, local councils, all of the people used to think it didn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. They're making decisions that affect our children and affect generations to come. Because once they get on there, they can be pretty power hungry and take up a lot of time and energy and focus pushing a radical agenda. So run for those offices too.
Yeah. Right? No, so I have a question. Might be a little selfish because I see all these students that are so worried about the future of the country. We're here at Turning Point USA. There's thousands of kids here. What, with your insider perspective, what is being done with the movement right now to focus on winning some of the Gen Z people over that maybe care about student loan debt, the cost of college, climate change, the environment, all the issues that young people really care about that the left is dominating in right now? Have you seen any shifting on our side of what we can do to fix that?
I think there's definitely been a focus on trying to get that information out there and not allowing the radicals to sort of shape it in a way that is very disingenuous and spreading false information. And they do that. It's fear-mongering and then misinformation so that people go, wait a second, is this something that's happening? But when you drill down on it, they don't have the facts and information. So I think it's important for young people at events like this to actually hear from speakers in those areas, environmental issues, etc., because everyone wants to be, you know, socially responsible, environmentally responsible. No one's like, hey, I want to destroy the environment. I don't think anyone wakes up and says that, right? So
maybe China.
Get it together.
Maybe China. Maybe Xi Jinping.
Wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly.
But no American with good values.
Never met a virus they didn't like. But so that's why you have to get out there and do it, you know, and actually give them the information, because they're not getting it at school.
No,
they're getting
not.
the opposite, you know, and so they say, oh my God, if you don't want, like we had a class that was very involved in CRT and wanting to talk about, we got to save the whales and save the environment and do this and do that. And if you disagreed at all, forget about it.
Oh, yeah, you're not allowed to disagree. Well, Kimberly, I think we can speak on behalf of Turning Point USA and say thank you. We are so grateful for you.
Pleasure.
You are beautiful and inside and out, smart, witty, clever, and just, I don't know, you don't seem like you ever sleep. We're grateful for you. And make sure you speak at all of our conferences because you are really, everyone wants to see you and you have so much energy.
I think it's important. We've got to lead and be the example and be the change that we want for the country. So now is not the time for anybody to be shy. Now is the time to be fully engaged and operational.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Another fantastic conversation. It was so fun having those conversations at Media Row, and then obviously a lot of other contributors you see sitting down and having conversations because we're pulled about 1,000 different directions. I know we had a breakout session and everything, but Kimberly Guilfoyle, the way she breaks this stuff down and the role of parents, obviously they've been under attack.
Oh, goodness.
So much, especially over the past year or so, and the FBI has been sicked on them like dogs. It's disgusting, but luckily we have people like Kimberly Guilfoyle breaking that down and then really understanding the mission behind Turning Point USA. There's so many inspiring young people at these events on college campuses across the country, and I think she really understands the role that this next generation plays. And now, our final interview of these exclusive AmericaFest 2021 interviews, Joe Anglim. He was on Survivor 3 times. 3 times. Could you imagine even being on Survivor once?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Thank you anyways.
But he talks about how socialism sucks and then how he's actually partnered with some different organizations to make sure we can end sex trafficking forever. Enjoy. We're back at AmericaFest 2021. We got our good friend Joe Anglim. He is a TPUSA ambassador with us.
Sir.
How are you enjoying the experience so far?
It's been so great. It's been wonderful being here. Just humbled and honored, and it's just great to see so much amazing energy and from every demographic of people, from young to old and everyone in between. So.
Well, it's funny because there's so many people that connect online. I know we've connected online too, and I haven't been able to see that beautiful mustache in person yet. So
in person, yeah. You can thank Sierra, my wife, for that. She likes the Doc Holiday, as we call it.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
It's kind of got a Raleigh fingers look to it. I'm a big A's fan. So.
Hell yeah, hell yeah.
And then something here too that I'd love is when we get all our ambassadors and influencers together. Like I know when Charlie was speaking to us, we had Tyler Boyer talk and saying, hey, you guys all have these massive platforms and these different niches. And I know you use art quite a bit too to reach people, and that's just a different part of culture and an art form within itself that can really make a difference inside of the world, inside the culture.
Yeah.
And so when you go to an event like that, you have the influencer retreat, do you just feel a little bit more revitalized about what you can do and how we can be stronger together?
Yeah, I really do. I think it's really amazing that we can all take our passions and our creative energy and in our, like you said, in our different niche, and we all have these amazing gifts, right? And I say they're divinely inspired, and God gives us these platforms. Sometimes we don't realize how influential we can be. But when we combine and talk about our influence of how we want to use that for the greater good and for the impact that we want to have in the world, I mean, it's powerful magic that's happening in the room. And yeah, Charlie mentioned that, we are in a very unique time in our history. It's probably the best time to be alive, and I say that all the time. But we really do have an amazing opportunity to share instantaneously using technology and our platforms, and create conversations, create new economies, create new businesses together, and yeah, it's really fun.
Explain that a little bit more, because there's a lot of people that like to promote the doom and gloom. So when you say this is the best time, a lot of people would be like, what do you mean? Like, we've been locked indoors, we have people that are blatantly overreaching, they're telling us what to do with our bodies. How do you explain that this is the best time?
Yeah, I mean, so being on Survivor 3 times, I really had the privilege of getting to suffer in a new way that I had never experienced suffering before, like real.
And people don't suffer with a bunch of like cameras around either.
Oh man, 24 hours a day, you're just, I say it's camping with none of the fun stuff. So there's no food, there's no igloo full of food, there's no tent, there's no escaping the reality of real suffering. And I think just from that perspective, I really understand that we do have a lot of first world problems, and when we're bored and we have nothing else to do, sometimes we create a habit of complaining about things that really, are very trivial. And in this world right now, I think there's a lot of suffering on, from, like, obviously we have the COVID everything that's happened
Yep.
with COVID, everything that's happening with the economy, inflation. It's kind of this, depending on your pain point, everyone's experiencing it differently.
Feels
But
like crisis after crisis after crisis.
it is. But you know what the beautiful thing about pain and suffering truly it's a call to action to move and create healing. It's
Yep.
just as important to have the balance of like, you don't know joy without knowing suffering. So knowing that, and where I obviously would like to bring my platform in to help heal the world, like you mentioned with art. The arts is one of the most amazing things we have as a gift to unite people, right? Music and culture, and it's kind of this even playing field that everybody is like just can appreciate the talents that we're given. So that's kind of where I'm at with my art and with my platform, is wanting to push into a new type of society where we promote those things again, and we rally around each other. And I say every time in history we look, and the arts was kind of the revolution was in music, and the revolution was in Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel against the church. Like, those are big things that I think we need to come back to and focus on, especially now.
Because I feel like you can find a lot of healing inside of that too. Because you're talking about like painting and drawing a little bit. That's how you reach out to people with this?
So I do workshops, essentially incorporating a little bit of all of the arts. So I do a lot of meditation, breath work, visualization, and then through painting and drawing or journaling, depending on the group. But we essentially
I could definitely journal a lot more.
we dive deep. Yeah, no, but it's very intrinsic. It's very healing, and a lot of art therapy. That's just a way for us to even just identify maybe some suffering that's happening in our internal ecosystem, and bring it to light, and maybe in a safe space share it and talk about it. And it's just sometimes you just don't realize what's there until it's right in front of you. And I've had very powerful, amazing healing experiences with people, just on a very intrinsic, creative level of not putting pressure on them to have to feel anything, but just to express something on paper. And it's cool. It's a cool process.
Speaking of painting, though, there's a brand new painter on the scene, and he's gotten a lot of attention lately and made a lot of maybe unearned money. Hunter Biden.
Oh,
what do you think of his stuff?
Man, I would love to sell a painting for $500,000. I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not that level yet, but it's very interesting, I would say, to observe the art world and the art community, because there is a lot of objectivity with art, right?
Yep.
What value do we put on a piece of art? But what I'm finding more interesting now is the value that we've now invested in, like our, not just our platforms, but in our social equity, like not even equity, but our ability to speak and our voice, and the power that's value to a lot of people, right? The followership, the fellowship that we're building. So I'm more excited to build art that obviously really makes an impact, can shed some light on some tough subjects, and maybe open up a discussion that needs to happen, because, like I said, there's a lot of suffering, and if the art is obviously being used for good, if you're making a business exchange with someone on the other end who really actually enjoys your art, and it's not just funneling money to your pocketbook, I don't know, to each their own. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of his art personally. So.
Well, I think something we can just hound on is just the fact that you use your platform for good, and the fact that we can have an event like this that displays so many different aspects of culture and the arts. Where I know James O'Keefe, where he was able to tell his story in a beautiful art form.
Yeah.
And I know unfortunately, I jumped in like halfway through, so it's kind of like you jumping halfway through a movie or something. But everything I did get to see, I went back and watched the video. It's like, wow, that's such a fascinating way to tell your story, because a lot of people can go up there and have some powerful things to say, but giving these people this visual aspect and this sense of emotion that you're really not getting in any other performance.
Yeah, it was really a cool perspective from, and I know he has a background in musical dance and theater, and it was cool to see. I would have loved to hear what he had to say. But he did, he obviously articulated what he wanted to say through the art of dance, and it was great.
Like the snippets too, right? You said
it does, and it was such a unique way to tell his story in little snippets and little sound bites, and he really left me with a hook. Like, if I didn't know who he was, I would want to now know more. Like, what is his story? What is his background? What is he revealing? So I think he did a really good job. I was actually really impressed with the performance. performance. So yeah, it's cool.
A couple more things for you.
Yes.
So obviously you were provided a massive platform being on Survivor for 3 different seasons.
Yes.
And a lot of people saw what Jeff Probst had to say.
Yeah.
Said he always had his signature line, like, come on in, guys.
Come on in,
Like,
guys.
I love Survivor. I know I watch you on Survivor, and
Yeah.
I always try to think, I really think I'd get booted pretty early. I don't know how long. I don't know how long I'd last. You really find out who people are on Survivor, but it seems like
true.
there's this woke ideology that gets thrown into a place where that was an outlet away from the world, where we get to see people like you struggle, and for some reason we get some good feeling. It's like, is Joe gonna make it? Is he gonna go through?
Well, and kind of back to that, the suffering part, I think there's something amazing, right, that why we're drawn to certain reality shows is because we're watching a character and how they're handling this adversity, right?
Yep.
And how they're handling that struggle. And a beautiful part is that we all, in our own way, experience suffering. So
Yep.
you're relating to these characters on the screen, and right, some are just very different than you personally, and maybe they're now your villain, and some that you relate to. And I would say, like, luckily I was just very authentic in myself, and it obviously resonated with a lot of the Survivor community, which is cool. And I just went out there and said, you know what, I'm gonna play really hard. I'm gonna embrace this moment and try to just go above and beyond what, you know, me personally and myself and what I want to accomplish in life. But this is my, you know, I've always dreamt about being on Survivor.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gonna embrace the moment. Win or lose, I'm gonna have a great experience. And I lost 3 times, which really sucks, but I mean, I met my beautiful wife. I have a family now. I'm a dad, so it's given me
Beautiful baby
so
girl,
much. Thank you, man. And I truly just try to remind myself of that experience all the time. And not everybody has the same Survivor experience, but from that, I really did. I want to use my platform that I built over the years and just really try to help people and share my experience. And if, you know, from big to small, you just never know what thing you might say or what little, you know, little bit of advice or, you know, just sharing your personal struggles, how it can inspire and help somebody that's also struggling. And I don't know, I think that has a big impact in where we're at in the world and what we need to do for the future, man.
And it's interesting to see how people connect with different speakers or different political commentators or whoever they may be at an event like this. And it's similar to what's going on in Survivor. You're drawn to certain people.
Yeah.
And were you drawn to somebody that you just couldn't help but cheer for? Who's your favorite Survivor of all time?
Oh, shoot. Favorite Survivor of all time has to be my wife, obviously. Like, you know,
Good
I mean,
answer.
I love,
Good
oh
answer.
man. But she's actually, she's a badass. She's a stud. She like rides.
You guys are such a power couple.
She
It's
rides
unbelievable.
horses. I don't even go near the horses, you know, like she's just so amazing in so many ways. And looking back though, I mean, she made it way farther than I did every time she played. And I just really admire, you know, her strength because it is really hard. I mean, it's hard being out there for people who are, you know, just strong-willed, but it's a game of social politics. And you never know who you're going to be in this game with. And adaptability is huge. Like getting outside your comfort zone is inevitable. So I'm just very, I appreciate what the game has really taught me inside and outside the game, and now learning to navigate all of the other facets of, like you said, the social politics outside of the game. But we are, right? We're in the game of life. But inside or out of the game, what are you bringing into the game? It's kind of this karmic wheel of energy. You know, you get what you put in, and it also rewards you in the end too. If you're a good human and you have a good heart and you know what your values and your character are, and you're not a character, but you have character. I think those things can go a long way. So.
Yeah, you find out who people are because obviously you're competing for so much money, and
$1 million.
you're still like you're trying to figure out. Well, I need friendships, but is this a real friendship? And I think there's probably a lot of people that could use a Survivor experience right now. Go and find out who these people really are.
Yeah.
Go through some real struggle. But final question I have for you is: you're connected with Operation Underground Railroad.
Yes.
Our
OUR Rescue. Yes.
Yeah, and I know I watched Operation Tucson.
Yes.
And Tim Ballard, the work that him and his team have done,
it's incredible.
Making sure that people know about the human trafficking that's really going on.
Yeah.
And someone like him, I want you to talk about your involvement and also talk about this just emotional aspect behind it, where someone like that has to find a way to separate himself from the emotion of going to inside these conversations with some of the most despicable people on earth. But at the same time, he's going to do so much good.
Yeah, so I got involved, over 5 years ago with OUR Rescue, and yeah, it was just kind of a networking event. You know, a buddy of mine asked if we could screen a film for Sundance Film Festival, and we had a private video to show, and it ended up being Operation Toussaint. And it was so powerful when I saw this film that I was moved to tears at least a dozen times while watching it. And I came back and I told Sierra, I said, babe, this is the most important human rights issue that's not being talked about in the world, and especially in the U.S. And Tim Ballard, as you mentioned, Tim Ballard, he worked for the Department of Homeland Security. He worked, on the border, and he was seeing these children being trafficked, and he would have to go through really hardcore videos of, child rape and child abuse. And it was just so, he got to the place where he couldn't help all these kids because he was bound by the border. He couldn't go off into these other countries.
And he had so many kids himself too.
He did.
How do you, as a parent that?
As a new dad, I couldn't imagine, let alone knowing that my child was kidnapped or being abused or trafficked like that, and feeling powerless, feeling like, who do I go to? Where do I, if we're defunding the police and we don't have enough resources and training, and how do we help these kids? And and imagining that they're mine, that there's a parent out there that's in that situation, I would do anything to get my kid back. And so I really related to his story, and me and Sierra found a way to be as involved as we possibly can be. And they not only go into the darkest corners of the world and rescue these children, but they also provide them with aftercare programs, education, work training. It's an amazing, amazing, beautiful organization. And I always tell Sierra, I say, God gave us these platforms, and there's so much more work to do. But I'm so thankful for the work that Tim and his team are doing. And every year it collectively gets bigger, and the impact is greater. And I believe since its founding, I think they've saved over 3,000 kids. And it's really, there's so much to talk about with it, but I really am passionate about it. And I don't think there's any, I honestly think it could unite the world. If every single person focused solely on this issue and could drop all of the other, issues that we have right now and focus on the kids and focus on, and not just kids, but there's adults being trafficked, and, slave labor camps in China, and the Uyghurs, and there's so much happening in our world that we really do need a revival.
Well, we get so stuck in this American mindset, and there's so many people that are on the left that are just trying to tell you how terrible this place is, while there's people getting murdered, millions of people getting murdered overseas. And then you have people like Tim Ballard I know he had a great opportunity to keep growing in the Department of Homeland Security.
He did.
But he decided, hey, I'm leaving this, and I'm leaving the security of this government job to go and start saving kids and educating people on this process. I'm going to travel across the globe, and I think you're a great example of someone that we can watch so many different documentaries or read a tough article or see a tough video and say, I feel bad, or I wish there was something I could do. But you actually said, no, I'm not just going to think about this, I'm going to be about it.
Absolutely. Because, you either want to reject it immediately, this can't be happening. This isn't, or you just feel so desensitized by it and separate from it that, that's happening in other parts of the world. Or it has to be a continuous conversation. It has to be a continuous call to action. And I'm the kind of guy that, I see a problem, I want to fix it. I want to help in any way I can, or find someone who can, be the middleman if I have to be. But I just felt it in my heart, and the Spirit is just telling me that this is something so important that there is nothing really else that is as important as this. My purpose now is to, like we're doing right now, just sharing my testimony of what I've experienced, and lots of friends who've gone on the missions and seen, and operators who are firsthand, changing. Yes, amen. They are truly making a difference, and so I appreciate, bringing it to light and talking about it. And it's such a hard topic that, it's not dinner, normal dinner table conversation. It's uncomfortable, but like the best thing that you can do is talk about it and bring more light and bring more people and more awareness. And so we can start, the change and the healing.
And I think we wrap it up with, it might be a wildly uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
But if you think about how uncomfortable that conversation at the dinner table might be, imagine how uncomfortable this life is that these kids are living and what they get thrown into. And it's just enough talk. Like we need to start trying to make a difference and shedding light on these situations.
And you put it perfectly. Like just put yourself into the perspective of that one kid. If it's one kid, right? I mean, we could get into statistics and you could say, oh, that's not happening. But like if it's one kid that's in that situation and your voice or your conversation led to them being alleviated from that suffering, and now they have hope and they have joy. And I mean, when you meet these kids, you're like, oh my gosh, like, maybe what I did really did make a difference. So, yeah, I'm thankful, man, and we got a lot of work to do, but like I said, it's a great time to be alive, and yeah, I'm happy we're all, on the right side and doing the right things.
Well, we always got a lot of work to do, and thankful for people like you, and we're glad you're a part of Turning Point USA and shedding light on some great stuff and making a big difference. So thanks a lot.
Appreciate you, brother. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what. You probably learn a lot about yourself when you're on Survivor. And you learn how you want to be, and he actually eventually met his wife through Survivor.
How about that?
Maybe I should go on Survivor.
Maybe you should. That's a great idea. Go to Survivor, meet your wife. There we go. Problem solved.
That's the only thing I'm missing. But that is actually the end of our interviews today and end of all our exclusive interviews from AmericaFest 2021. Huge shout out to all of our guests that stopped by. I love reliving AmericaFest. It was such a great time to feel patriotic again. You got 10,000 people that crammed into the convention center, and more conversations like this is what we need to open up the media space to. So it was fantastic. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you later.
Welcome to our first ever political correctness and inclusivity training. First off, safety. Just want to make sure that everyone here is jabbed, right? Just kidding, none of my business. So I'm Dylan, I'm your HR rep. A little bit about me. I'm a white man, and I'm so sorry if that makes any of you uncomfortable. On to the first order of business today. We're going to be talking about diversity. And Josh, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Donde está la biblioteca? I'm from Colorado. I learned that from Dora.
Okay, second order of business. This is a mental health friendly workplace. Yes, Alex.
If we're really a mental health friendly workplace, what are we doing about the suicide rate of the birds? Because I saw 2 dead birds in the parking lot yesterday.
Alex, shut up.
Yeah, there's been a really big disregard for the bird lives ever since people in the office started sharing the birds are not real meme. Birds are definitely real. The government's putting chips in their brain, which is making them self-destruct and kill themselves, and we have to be talking about the real issues, or what are we doing here at all? Bird lives matter.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
That's what BLM stands for.
That's not what it stands for.
She brings this up every time.
Why is Mitchell in a Pope costume?
Why are the snacks always feel like this?
I think this went really well. All in all, this is a great place to work, and we're becoming more politically correct every single day.
Have you ever worked for a company and one day realized that everything they stand for went against your beliefs? Maybe you thought that the work you were doing was helping people, and then one day the wool was pulled away from your eyes and you knew you had to get out. On September 26th, 2009, today's guest had such an epiphany. She had just been promoted to clinic director at one of the largest Planned Parenthoods in the country after dedicating 8 years of her life to the organization. Helping women in crisis was a huge desire in her heart, and she thought that she was fulfilling that desire every time she ushered women one by one to the back of the clinic to have an abortion. At first, she believed abortion was something that Planned Parenthood was looking to decrease. But as time went on, she noticed more and more that abortion was the main service Planned Parenthood was selling to women in crisis pregnancies. It started to make her feel a little uneasy, but she wasn't in a place to fully walk away until that hot September day in Bryan, Texas. Our guest was asked to assist with an ultrasound-guided abortion. For a place that specializes in ending pregnancies, this should have been routine, right? Instead, reality hit her like a train when, on the ultrasound screen, she witnessed a 13-week baby fight for its life against the abortion doctor. She was horrified. Sadly, the baby ultimately met the same fate that over 600,000 aborted babies meet in the United States every year. There was no denying what abortion actually was and what she had pushed so many desperate women to do throughout her career. That's when she did what she never thought in a million years she would do. Reach out to one of the very pro-life groups that had spent time praying outside of her clinic. Deep down, she knew that she not only had to do a complete heart and soul transformation and repent for what she had done, but she also had to quit her director's position at Planned Parenthood and start a brand new career advocating for babies inside the womb as a pro-life activist. To say that Planned Parenthood did not take the news of our guest departure well is an understatement. Planned Parenthood's greatest threat and biggest fear are employees quitting and speaking out about what goes on behind the scenes. The organization immediately took legal action to silence our guest with a gag order and brought her to court in an attempt to keep her quiet about abortion being their biggest business. But our guest wasn't scared. She knew the lawsuit was a sham, and it turns out she was right because it was ultimately thrown out of court. Today, she travels all around the world sharing her story about what she saw that day and how corrupt Planned Parenthood really is. She knows that their goal is not to actually help women, but to profit off of their pregnancy crises, and she has kept her promise to herself in working hard to expose them in every possible way. She is the founder of And Then There Were None, a ministry that helps abortion clinic workers leave the abortion industry. And her nonprofit has helped over 430 workers escape. In 2019, her life story was depicted in the movie Unplanned, based off of her book by the same name. She still lives in Texas with her husband and 8 beautiful children. You may have heard her testimony before, as she's one of the most well-known speakers and activists in the pro-life movement. What you may not know is that our guest is sometimes seen as a controversial advocate for life who doesn't shy away from a challenge. She's also the best person to go to for the real inside scoop on Planned Parenthood and what really happens in the company behind closed doors. Welcome, author and pro-life speaker, Abby Johnson, to The Spillover. Abby, you and I got to meet last spring in person for the first time ever, and I was just blown away by your personality to me. I mean, you never are afraid to say what you think, which I love, but also gets you into some trouble sometimes.
That's true.
If I had to describe you, I'd say that your values, they're very obviously conservative, they're very traditional, but what I find to be very interesting is that despite your traditional values, you also work outside the home. Your husband stays home with your 8 kids, right?
Yeah, that's
so talk
right.
about that dynamic and how that works for your family.
Yeah. So, I mean, Doug was a teacher for a lot of years. And when I started like popping out kids like crazy, we, we're thinking, okay, what are we going to do here? Is he going to go back to work as a teacher? We had moved to Austin. And so we were like, is he going to go back to work it just became very apparent that if he went back to work, that he would essentially just be working to pay for daycare. And so we just thought, what would it be like if he stayed home? And I mean, at that point, I didn't expect to have like a gaggle of children. Like, I just thought I would have like 2 or 3.
Yeah. Like you need
8.
a TLC reality show at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, like I didn't expect to be like a friggin' Duggar. So, but like at that time we just thought, okay, like he'll stay home for a few years and then go back to work. But it just ended up working out so well, and especially because I travel so much, it would be hard for me to be on the road and travel as much as I do, knowing that like if he was not in the home, it just like gives me peace of mind knowing that he's here. And I mean, like we are like, we are like pretty traditional, I guess, like in the sense that, he is the spiritual leader of our home, like, but yeah, like he is the one staying at home. And I tell people all the time, like, yes, I'm the one that works. Yes, I'm the one that, makes money in our home, but there's a lot of different ways that you can be a provider for the home. And in that sense, he provides in many different ways for our home outside of, financially providing.
Do you feel like pro-lifers are being intellectually honest when they say that women can have it all if they don't choose abortion? Or do you find, with you being a working mom with so many kids, do you find that inevitably something is always going to suffer a little bit, whether that's your marriage, your family, or your career, if you have to choose between one, or can you really just do it all?
If I didn't have Doug, I wouldn't be able to do everything that I'm doing. Right. So, and I will say, honestly, Alex, like I've missed out on a lot with my kids. Like, there's so much that I've missed out on. I've never seen, I have 8 kids. I've never seen any of my kids take their first step.
Wow.
I've, missed a ton of recitals and sporting events. And, I've missed a lot. I've missed a lot of milestones, I've missed a lot of like first words and so you miss a lot. I think the difference is that I'm not missing it because I'm like, because I'm working at a convenience store. Not to like diminish other kinds of work. I'm just saying like, I feel, I guess in a way, okay about it because I do feel compelled to do what I'm doing. Like I do feel called to do what I'm doing. And I feel like I must do it. And so, I'm trying to, I guess like my prayer always is that my kids understand that I had to miss some of their things because I was helping save the lives of other children.
Right.
And so that's sort of like your hope, I think, as a parent, like as you're doing this sort of work, is that your kids just eventually understand why you weren't always there.
I went into your story of just, being the super successful director with Planned Parenthood for many, many years and then quitting, obviously, once you saw an ultrasound during an abortion and saw what an abortion really was. And since you actually worked for Planned Parenthood, for many years, I wanted to know the truth from you on what the company culture is actually like. Does Planned Parenthood actually and honestly believe that their goal is to provide women, affordable or free healthcare services or wellness checkups? Or when they say those things, do they know that they're lying?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would say that, there was a time, I would say that, yeah, that probably was more of their goal, to provide sort of this preventative healthcare, sort of this family planning, birth control, STD testing, well woman care. That probably was at some time their goal at one point in time. But that fell by the wayside a long time ago. And even more so in the past, I would say 8 years, Planned Parenthood has become so incredibly brazen about their desire to provide abortions, to sell abortions. They're not even like hiding behind this family planning facade anymore. Planned Parenthood has abortion facilities open that are only providing abortion 6 days a week, 50 hours a week.
Wow.
So they don't do birth control. They don't do STD testing. They don't provide pap smears. There's no breast care there. They're not doing anything like that. They are only committing abortions full-time 6 days a week. And there's a bunch of those clinics now that are Planned Parenthood facilities. So they're really moving into full-time abortion care. And a few years ago, right before Cecile Richards retired, she actually tweeted out, I think it was in a tweet, that cervical cancer screenings or pap smears are as important as abortion care at Planned Parenthood.
Wow.
And so, that is what they do. They are an abortion provider.
But when pro-choice activists say, well, abortion isn't even half of the picture of what Planned Parenthood provides, what is the reality?
That's actually something that they're trying to really get away from, that talking point. When I went to the Women's March after Trump was elected, and they had like a Women's March like convention. And so I snuck in and was actually quickly recognized.
Oh, no.
And was like told to get out. But I went in there and I went into one of the Planned Parenthood meetings, and one of the girls that worked there actually stood up and she was like, can we please stop saying that that abortion is only a small part of what we provide at Planned Parenthood? Because we all know that's not true. We all know it's a huge part of what we do. And all we're doing is promoting abortion stigma when we act like there's something wrong with abortion.
She said the quiet part out loud.
Exactly. And so that's really what they're doing now is they're like, stop saying that it's only 3% of what we do, because you're basically saying that there's something wrong with it, right? Like, be public, be proud of having
Celebrate your abortion, shout your abortion.
That's right. Be proud of the fact that Planned Parenthood is providing all of these abortion services. And that's essentially what they're doing now. Like, don't promote abortion stigma. That's like their big thing now.
Let's talk about the Planned Parenthood employee conferences or get-togethers. This was kind of depicted in your movie Unplanned. Like when they're doing these employee, I don't know what you call it, like meetings, conventions, whatever, where everybody gets together, what goals or expectations do they set there for employees? Is there a rah-rah abortion mentality like that woman at the women's march, or no?
Oh yeah, it's very like it's very pro-abortion, right? So it's very much like, yeah, we're gonna do as many abortions as we can, this year. And but a lot of the conference is it's actually really interesting because I remember it's a lot of breakout sessions where you go and you listen to people who are doing sort of I don't know, cutting edge things, I guess, like in abortion care. Well, it's a weird way to say it, but I remember going into a talk from a late term abortion provider, and he was talking about how the way that he provided late term abortion care to women. And he was like, it was like, enlightening us, all of us that didn't provide late term abortion care. And so he was talking to us about it, and he was telling us, well, what we do for our patients is we give them biohazard bags to take home with them. And it's like a hotel kit. And so we give them biohazard bags. We give them scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Ugh. Because many times they will deliver their baby in the hotel. And so we tell them, go ahead and cut the umbilical cord, deliver the placenta, put everything in the biohazard bag and bring it back up to our facility. And then they actually incinerate the babies. They cremate the babies at their facility. And so he was bragging about, this amazing, birthing bag basically that they give to their patients. And so, I mean, I remember being like, that's disgusting, but it's sort of like that. Like
But I mean, when you look around, okay, when you're at this employee summit or whatever, and you're looking around at all these other Planned Parenthood employees while somebody is talking about, here's some scissors to cut your client's umbilical cord off and do all these different things. Does everybody have a look on their face of like, wow, yeah, this is amazing, like pure joy? Or are people kind of horrified and confused like you were feeling?
Like, it was sort of mixed. Like, I remember, like, my boss was like, man, I wish we could do late term abortions. Like, I wish we could do that. And I was like, oh, dear God, like, I'm so glad we're not doing that at our clinic. But like, it was really like a mix. But the majority of people there, they saw these people like Dr. Tiller, like when I worked there, like Dr. George Tiller, who was shot and everything, like he was a hero. I mean, like people like hero worshiped him. And I mean, he was killing late term babies, right? Like almost up until birth.
Are any Planned Parenthood clinics in the United States performing late term abortion?
No, they generally stop at about 24 weeks. All Planned Parenthoods, it's private clinics that do like after 24 weeks. But these doctors like Curtis Boyd and Leroy Carhart, George Tiller, Warren Hearn, Shelley Sella, all these like late term abortionists. Oh my gosh, it's like freaking hero worship. At these conferences, they can't go anywhere without having like a line of people like waiting to talk to them. It's sick.
How would you describe the office culture at your Planned Parenthood clinic? Did it feel repressive? Like, do people walk on eggshells in the break room because they're afraid of saying anything that might suggest that they have doubts about the work that they're doing? Or is everybody like in really good spirits?
No, it was very much, it was very much like sort of a team feeling, but it was like a us versus them sort of mentality. So it was like, you hear about like a bunker mentality, like in combat, like in the war, like that's sort of what it felt like. Like we were always on the defensive, we're always like fighting, like we're fighting for something that's important. But you were made to feel scared all the time. You were made to feel fearful. So, we had FBI agents, we had marshals, we had, Texas Rangers, we had people that would come into our facilities. We had like bomb squad experts that would come into our facilities on a regular basis. And they would, tell us about how, pro-lifers are out to kill us. And, we have to be extra careful. And somebody may come in and put a bomb in our clinic.
Did you ever genuinely feel like pro-lifers were trying to kill you when you were pro-choice and working at Planned Parenthood?
I mean, yeah, I felt like I felt like that every day. I mean, because I was made to feel terrified by all of these like law enforcement people. Like I thought, oh my gosh, these people are trying to kill me. Like, and that's how you're made to feel. Like that's very intentional, that you're made to feel like so scared when really like there's not a threat, right? But it's just you're just made to feel so scared. And it just heightens this division between you and the people outside who are they just really want to help you, right? They just really want to help the women going in. But it's just this heightened anxiety, this like heightened fear all the time.
Are abortion?
But on the inside, I mean, like with the people that I worked with, like we were all very close. I mean, until you're not.
Yeah.
Like you're all very close until you decide you don't want to be in
until
an
you're a
abortion clinic anymore.
And then you're
exactly.
a traitor. So when you guys are working together, like, is there any room, is there any freedom to be outwardly disturbed by anything that you see? Like, was there ever any moment where other employees were like, man, that was like a brutal thing to watch today?
No, definitely not.
They're just used to it.
No, I mean, like we had a couple of employees that were like actively Catholic. And I mean, I say that like, I hate to say they were like really practicing their faith, but I mean, like they did go to mass and stuff.
Right.
But they worked in the clinic and they pretty much like worked up front and they didn't really go into the back. They like just handled money and stuff. And I remember just one time, there was like, we had like a pretty large, like a 14-week set of twins that were aborted. And for whatever reason, someone had talked one of them into going back into the POC lab, like to see what the babies look like.
And what is a POC lab for people that haven't ever seen your movie Unplanned?
Yeah, POC lab is the products of conception lab. That's where we would piece the babies back together. And like this one worker, like never went back there. She was like, no, that's disgusting. Like, I'm never going back there. And, this Catholic lady, for some reason, like they talked her into going back there, and they were like, no, it's so cool. Like, you need to go see it. Like, it looks so neat. These like twins. And she went back there and she was just totally disgusted by it. And she was just like, like, I can't believe y'all did those abortions on those babies so far, so far along. And she was like, I'm never going back there again. Like, that was really the only time I remember somebody like being outwardly disgusted, by something that happened. But no, you just never. I remember my boss talking very openly about her approval of abortions up until, the date of birth. And you just did not speak against that. I mean, it's just, and that's the way it is in like pro-abortion culture. There's just so much sort of unity in that culture that even if you're against it, even if you're against something, even if you're like, I'm not really like for that.
I mean, it sounds like indoctrination.
You don't
to the
speak
root.
against it. You just go with it. Whatever it is, you just go with it.
You had told me when we had met last spring, I think, something about how you really felt like there was some spiritual warfare going on with your boss at Planned Parenthood. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my boss was raised Catholic, and she had like I don't know, sort of like some crazy stuff happen in her life, and got divorced and became a lesbian and all this stuff. And anyway, she ended up becoming like an atheist, I guess, or agnostic or something. But there were like times at the clinic, I remember we had this religious sister praying outside, this nun praying outside. And, I remember going into my office one day, and my boss was like standing at the window and like looking outside. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, did you see that nun out there? And I was like, yeah, I saw her, and she's like, she's been out there like for hours. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, like there, like the protesters were out there all day, every day. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, when is she going to leave? Like, when do you think she's going to leave? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, they're out there all day. Like, why are you so bothered? She was so like bothered by,
I'm genuinely saying this in a very serious manner. Do you think that there was some demonic possession stuff going on with that woman?
I mean, I think there very well could have been. Like, she would say like some of the most vile things like I've ever heard like come out of somebody's mouth. Like, she, like, I hate to even say this out loud, but like she would make jokes about like the aborted babies, like looking like something to eat, like looking like barbecue.
Oh my gosh.
She had she was like, oh, let's make like, she would say things like when the Coalition for Life, when the pro-life group moved in next door, she's like, let's make cookies for them shaped in like babies, and let's make the icing red so it looks like blood. And
oh my gosh.
Like it was weird. Like she was really, really like obsessed with abortion. And she would make jokes about like babies coming out like alive and how they would be like crying when they would come out. And
do you think she was joking, or do you think those were things that she had seen in her career?
No, I think those were probably things she had seen. And she just thought it was funny. So I think that when you work in the industry, she had worked in the industry for a long time, and like 3 times as long as I did. I think when you are in the industry for a long time, I think that, you become very vulnerable to like demonic oppression. I think you become very vulnerable to those sorts of attacks. I'm not like super like hyper spiritual in that way, but I do think that kind of stuff happens. And I think that that's very real. And we've seen that kind of stuff. We've heard about that kind of stuff happening like at abortion clinics and things like that.
Wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about your business being canceled because the majority of your customers share your values? That can be your reality by advertising your product or business on the Spillover. If you want to learn more about advertising to Cuteservatives, email ads@tpusa.com. Gain like-minded customers and help fund and support one of the fastest growing podcasts for conservative young women. While you were telling that story, you wouldn't be able to hear it, and listeners wouldn't obviously be able to hear it, but I could. I could hear all of my producers who are behind glass in a like padded room or a soundproof room or whatever, all gasp so loud at those examples that you just gave that I could even hear it through the padded wall. I mean, because it's that shocking, I think, to people. And people think that, these are just like myths and legends and folklore, essentially, that pro-life people make up, to paint the pro-abortion lobby a certain way. But you were an employee, you were pro-choice, and you were working there. And those were your real experiences of things that your boss was saying to you. So.
Yeah, I think like, the jokes that we used to say, like, like calling the freezer that we kept the babies in, like calling that the nursery, our code to get into the building was 2229 because that spelled out baby. Like that kind of stuff. Like people are like, ugh, like that's gross. Like it's like macabre, it's like this
macabre, yeah.
Really like dark humor. But I tell people, I'm like, that's nothing. I mean, like, that's nothing. Like you should have heard the stuff that came out of people's mouths. Like it's gross. Like, I mean, and it's so much darker and like so much more demonic than people could ever imagine. I remember the first time, it's probably my first week working at the clinic. We had this guy that worked there. His name was Aaron, and he didn't work there actually very long, but he told me, he was like, Abby, he was like, don't ever come up here at night by yourself. And I was like, why? And he was like, because girl, I swear to God, you can hear babies crying in the hallway.
Stop.
And I was like,
and he was serious?
Yeah, he was dead serious.
What did you think in the moment? Did you think like, yeah, like I can believe that? Or were you like, no way?
I mean, I was like, okay. I was like, okay, that's weird.
But in a pro-choice, like go back to pro-life Abby Johnson. Okay, this is before. In that moment, did that like resonate with you? Like, okay, if what we're doing is not killing human beings, why would there be, someone saying that you could hear sounds of baby crying at night in the hallway? Like, did any of that click? Like, we're ending the lives of human beings at all?
I mean, I just remember thinking like, well, that's weird, But I think Alex, like okay, first of all, like everybody needs to remember, I'd already had an abortion by that time. Okay. So I was already like neck deep in like denial of like the human person of an unborn child. Right. So I was already like super in denial of that. Like, I mean, and so I think for me, I think I didn't want to believe stuff like that was true. I was like, okay, Aaron, like whatever, because
weirdo. If you were to admit that, an unborn baby was
what
a
am I
human
having
being.
To admit?
Yes.
Then I'm having to admit
that
I killed my own child. Right. And I think that's why so many people are pro-choice right now. I think that's why so many women are pro-choice because, 1 in 3 women have had an abortion in our country. So depending on the stat you look at, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, it's still a lot. So that's so many women who have walked down that road, who have laid on that table, right? And so if they come around to the idea that abortion is wrong, that abortion is, taking the life of a human being, then what are they having to admit, right? They're having to admit that they took the life of their own child. Like, that is a big responsibility. That's a big burden. So it's a lot easier to be like, nah, it wasn't really a life.
Do you think that that's one of the biggest things that's preventing the pro-life side of the abortion debate into breaking through and changing minds, is because so many of the people whose minds we're trying to change have actually had an abortion themselves, and it's so hard to get them to admit what abortion is, because then they'd have to reconcile with that fact?
100%. Yeah.
So how do you,
wounded.
how do you do that? How do you show that sympathy to those women, but still get them to agree that it's ending a human life?
I tell people, like, so first of all, you're never going to win an argument on Facebook. Okay. Like, you're never going to win an argument like in a 365 comment, like, debate on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So, like, just don't do it. And like, but I tell people, like, when I talk to women and, and I talk to them about abortion, I'm always just like asking questions. I'm like, so, and they tell me, like, I've had an abortion. I'm like, well, what led you to have an abortion? Why did you feel like you needed to have an abortion? And, they'll tell me, and they'll be like, oh, well, I didn't have support. I didn't feel like, and I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that you didn't feel like you had support, and I just try to empathize with them, because I've known what it's like to feel alone. I've known what it's like to feel unsupported in a situation, like, even if it wasn't an unplanned pregnancy, right? I think we all know what it feels like to feel alone or unsupported or, whatever. And so I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry, you felt unsupported. And I'll ask them a question like, what do you think could have changed in your life at that moment so that you wouldn't have had an abortion? How do you think we could better serve women? And I just start getting their opinions about stuff, and I start asking them questions, and I, and a lot of times, like, just hearing their opinion and letting them know that, like, their voices matter and their voices are important, and we want to hear from them and we want to engage them in this process. And I'm like, and a lot of times I'm like, oh, well, let me tell you what I do. Like, a lot of times I know what I do, but I'm like, let me tell you what I do. Like, I run a ministry called Loveline, and we support moms who are pregnant. We support single moms. We support single dads. We pay their rent. We pay their utilities. We help them get, budgeting assistance. We, pay for daycare. We, like, I tell them, I'm like, do you think that would have been helpful to you? Do you think that would have made you feel more supported? And, like, when you tell them, like, this is what we're doing to help women, this is what we're actually doing to fill in that gap, a lot of times they're like, oh, wow, like, I didn't know that was available. All right. They'll say, I wish that would have been available for me. And so just letting them know, like, this is out there, and do you want to be involved in it? We've had women that have contacted us at Loveline that have donated to us. They're like, you know what? I'm actually pro-choice, but I'm going to donate to what you're doing because I wish I would have had that help when I was pregnant. And that's one step in bringing them over into our position.
Do you think that most of the women or workers, well, yeah, I guess women, that was stupid. Do you think most of the women who work at Planned Parenthood have had abortions because you were an employee that had also had an abortion? Like, is that a common thread?
Yeah. So we think about, our estimate is about 70% of the people who work there, the women who work there have had abortions. Yeah. That's one of the things that sort of draws them in, I think.
One of the most interesting things about Planned Parenthood that I've learned in the last couple years is just how ingrained they are in American culture. And I wanted to ask you about their influence. What does Planned Parenthood do to involve themselves in culture that people don't even know about?
Yeah. So there was what's really interesting, actually, I think most people don't know about is they have this entire, at the Federation, so at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, they have this entire department that's called like their, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like their culture department or something. And it's like media and culture department. And they have people that work full time that are on staff full time that work with TV producers, movie producers, like movie executives. And all they do full time is influence writers and producers and to normalize abortion in film and TV. And that's all they do full time. So a lot of times we'll see abortion scenes like, we see them in Scandal. We see them in Grey's Anatomy. You see them in all these other TV shows. You see it in movies. There was a movie that came out called Unpregnant that was specifically about abortion. You saw another movie that was specifically about abortion called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. You see, films like that are really normalizing and really almost like glamorizing abortion. That is thanks to primarily this department at PPFA, at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And they are working to really infiltrate our culture in these ways so that Planned Parenthood just seems normal, so that it seems sterile, bloodless, painless. That's the image of abortion that they want America to see.
Would it ever be possible for a pro-life organization to have the opportunity to partner with script writers and Hollywood producers and movie making houses and all this different stuff to have a pro-life say put into scripts, or would Hollywood never ever work with us?
I mean, it would be pretty difficult for them, to work with us. It's just not in Hollywood culture to promote the sanctity of human life. I've thought about creating a sort of like a ratings board, like a pro-life ratings board, where we have like former abortion workers, people who've actually worked in the industry, like former abortion doctors, like creating this ratings board where, every time abortion is in a TV show or a film or whatever, that this board actually rates it on accuracy.
You know what this reminds me of, Abby, is Plugged In by Focus on the Family.
Yeah, sort of like that, but it would just be specifically for abortion. Like, Is this accurate? Is this really what abortion is? Is this really what an abortion clinic looks like? And sort of giving a rating, like A through F or whatever for accuracy, and putting it out there publicly, and then being a resource to people, whether it's, secular film or whether it's Christian film or whatever. Like, we want to help you as you're tackling this topic. Like, we want to help you be accurate as you're tackling this very, unfortunately, controversial and difficult topic in film.
Speaking of abortion in movies, the most powerful scene, I think most would argue, in your movie Unplanned, which is based on your book of the same name, was the abortion scene where you are depicted when you had a chemical abortion, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So after taking the abortion pill. And at this year's March for Life last week, there was a man there who was going around making videos, and he came up to me. I knew that he was definitely on the pro-choice side. And he asked me, would you want women who take the abortion pill to be prosecuted? And I thought that was interesting. And I thought about your movie and you going through that. I mean, if you were asked that, how would you have responded to that question?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think it's one that we really have to weigh, right? When I first became pro-life, I was very much against prosecution of women. Like in all cases, I was like, no, definitely no, we can't, prosecute women. The longer that I've been in this movement, and I think the longer that I've been away from Planned Parenthood, and the more sort of brazen I've seen abortion become in our society, and women having, gosh, I just did a video on this woman who took an abortion pill on TV, right? I mean, abortion is supposed to be this like private thing, right, between a woman and her doctor, and then you've got women taking abortion pills on TV. You've got women, proudly proclaiming that they're having, 5, 6, 7 abortions. You've got abortion pills, being shipped in, through the mail. I think our culture's changing. I think people are becoming. I don't think abortion is as a delicate issue as it used to be. I don't think women are as. I don't think they're agonizing over this decision as maybe they used to be. And if we really believe that the unborn, the preborn are human beings, then I think we have to act like it. And if we're going to act like it, then I think that, there has to be penalty under the law for taking the life of
a lot of people in the
that.
pro-life movement would disagree with you on this, Abby.
I know they would. Now, I'm not saying that, we have to lock every woman up or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But I have come to a position where I believe that that there does need to be due process. And there would be some women who have absolutely been forced and coerced into
or just completely ignorant and have no idea.
Completely ignorant, have no idea what's going on. Their parents have forced them into making this decision. Should they be prosecuted? Absolutely not. But there are women who are very knowingly, very selfishly making the decision to have 9, 10, 12 abortions, who are taking abortions on the steps of the Supreme Court out in the open, who are taking the abortion pill on national TV. Do I believe that those women should go through some sort of possible prosecution for the murder of their child? Yeah, I think there should be some justice there, and I think there should be some due process. And so I have sort of come to a different opinion on that as I've watched our culture change.
Now, you took the abortion pill yourself. I think there is a huge problem with this false perception of the abortion pill, like it's just as easy as popping an aspirin. You took it. Can you please describe the reality of what that felt like, how quickly the effects came in and all of that?
Yeah. So the abortion pill is a series of pills. So you take the first pill, which is mifepristone, mifeprex. That's the actual RU46 part of the pill. That's the pill that actually kills the baby, or is intended to kill the baby. It deprives the baby of progesterone, which is essentially food for the baby. After I took that pill, I didn't feel anything. I felt fine. I felt nothing. But then you go home. They send you home with 4 pills, and that's the misoprostol. Those pills are designed to basically send you into labor. And so your uterus contracts, you begin to have contractions, and you expel the baby at home. That's the intention. And what society tells people, what Planned Parenthood tells people, what the abortion industry tells people is that this is going to be like, it's going to be like a period. You're going to have some bleeding, and you'll be back to normal after you expel the baby, and everything's going to be fine. The reality is that, about 20% of women have very serious complications from taking this pill. They have hemorrhagic bleeding. They have serious infections, including sepsis, which can cause death. Up to 40% of women have very serious nausea, dizziness, vomiting. This is not something that's like a Tylenol, even though that is how it is being described on these self-managed abortion webcasts that are being pushed everywhere to
What
young
do you mean
women.
self-managed abortion webcasts?
So that's what the abortion industry is now calling medication abortion that you're getting through the mail. They're calling it self-managed abortion. It's just an at-home abortion, super easy. Take the pills, no big deal. Nobody has to know. And in fact, they're telling women that when you go to the doctor, you tell the doctor that you had a miscarriage and not an abortion. So they're
Why?
encouraging women to lie
Why do
to
you have
their
to lie about
providers. For, I guess, fear that you're going to be stigmatized for having an abortion, or I don't know. But that's what they're actively telling women, to lie to your provider. I guess they're saying that you'll get subpar care if you tell a provider that you've had an abortion. And so they're telling them to say that you had a miscarriage. And they're telling these women that taking the medication abortion pills are as safe and are no different than taking Tylenol. But I can tell you that when I took the 4 pills at home, almost immediately I started having cramping. I started hemorrhaging. I passed my baby actually in the shower, and had to, pick up my baby off the shower floor, put my baby in the toilet, had to make a decision, to flush my baby down the toilet. And bled and bled and bled. I didn't stop bleeding heavily for 8 weeks.
And was it painful or just a lot of blood?
It was incredibly painful. I didn't realize, and I hadn't had any children then, so I didn't really realize like what I was feeling at the time. But I was really feeling labor contractions. I mean,
how far along were you?
I was only 8 weeks. So, 8 weeks. And now the FDA has approved medication abortion up to 10 weeks, which means Planned Parenthood is giving it out at 12 weeks. So, these women are delivering babies that are fully formed, that are several inches long. And they're seeing their fully formed baby come out of them in the toilet. And who knows what this is doing to women psychologically. To see their baby come out of them. And then, they're having to sort of return to the scene of the crime over and over again, their bathroom, after they've flushed their child down the toilet.
And there is an abortion pill reversal that women can do, right? If they've done this and they want to reverse it, there's a certain period of time you can try to reverse the abortion pill.
There is. So there's a reversal process that you can do after you've taken the first pill. So after you've taken the Mifeprex, there's a reversal process. It's essentially a massive dose of progesterone to reverse the side effects of the Mifeprex, which is trying to cut off the progesterone to your baby. So you just start supplementing an enormous dose of progesterone and pumping that into your system. It's been very successful. It's been very effective. And you can go to abortionpillreversal.com. There's physicians all over the country that are giving out the reversal if someone takes the pill and then makes a different decision and wants to save their baby.
I think because of the March for Life happening last week and stuff, a lot of more left-wing publications have come out, of course, in full throttle, just praising abortion and abortion rights and all these different things. And I told you I wanted to ask you a few things about this Glamour magazine article. So in case you haven't seen it, Glamour magazine just published an article that opened with this, okay? They said that they did this study called the Turnaway Study, which followed nearly 1,000 women over 5 years. They said that they found that abortion does not harm women and that women who are refused abortion have worse outcomes in the long run in terms of health, financial stability, and the safety of their children. The article went on to state something that I found to be disgusting, just totally disgusting. They said, the next time that you're in an argument about abortion rights, tell whoever you're talking to that there's no need to get emotional. This is so condescending. They can simply read the facts. So, Abby, I'm going to tell you some of these facts that they said, and then I want to hear what you have to say. So, the first claim by Glamour magazine said 95% of women who receive abortions reported immediately and 5 years after that their abortion was the right decision. What do you make of the 95%?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably accurate. I would say after my abortions, I felt relief. I would say most women, probably within that 5 to 7 year period, that's probably right. They probably do feel relief. We know from trauma studies that most women who have experienced some sort of traumatic event don't actually experience that trauma, and relive that trauma until 10 to 20 years later.
Wow.
So, asking a woman, 5 years after that event, how do you feel? It's not really a good representation of whether she's going to have regret over taking the life of her child. I would say that's probably accurate. I would say 95% is probably accurate. What they need to do is a longer term study, which hasn't been done. I think it intentionally hasn't been done. All of these studies that are done about post-abortion loss and regret are always stopped at 5 years.
This is very interesting.
There has never been a long-term study done by a pro-choice group, by like a reproductive justice group that went past 5 years. Never, ever.
Another claim that Glamour said per the study is that there is zero evidence that getting an abortion has any negative effects whatsoever on a woman's well-being or mental health. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, I think that's a big claim. I would like to know how they're measuring that, which I did look at the study and they didn't give an explanation as to how they're measuring that. There have been other studies done, which did list out the measurement tool that showed that women who have had abortions are 6 times more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely to have an eating disorder. They're more likely to have depression, to have signs of anxiety. The fact that they're not showing their measurement tool here and they're making a big claim like that is pretty interesting to me.
Let's shift gears to a controversy that recently surfaced with you. A couple months ago, you called out this woman, Jennifer Christie of Love Louder. That's another pro-life nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And then your organization, Pro Love Ministries, was affiliated with her. And Jennifer, for those that don't know, Jennifer had maintained this story about surviving a brutal rape. She said that she became pregnant. But eventually, you felt like the story didn't add up because dates didn't ultimately align with her claims. You posted on Facebook that there was no evidence of police reports. Jennifer refused to back her story with police and medical reports after it began to change. And even the ultrasound that she showed as part of her story didn't add up. And for years, her and her husband raised thousands of dollars to allegedly pay for surgeries that were necessary because of her rape, but she wouldn't even provide evidence that those surgeries ever even happened. So you, being the confident voice that you are, called her out on Facebook because you didn't feel like the truth in her story was evident. And now multiple people in the pro-life movement are calling for your cancellation. And I thought when I first heard about this, I thought this story reminded me kind of Jussie Smollett. I mean, before anyone called out Jussie Smollett, if you remember, Don Jr. was the first to say, okay, guys, something is not adding up here. And at first, people were like, well, how dare you not believe Jussie's story? And now, of course, we know Don was right. So I guess I wanted to ask you here and now, I mean, what caused you to start asking questions about this Jennifer woman? You know, she's an alleged rape victim and someone who you at one time considered your friend.
Yeah. It's really a sad story, actually. And it's been really tragic. The only reason I actually came out about it was because her organization, Love Louder, was an affiliate partner of my organization, Pro Love Ministries, and we had taken her on as an affiliate partner. And people were donating to her because I had endorsed her organization. And so I felt like I had a responsibility to come out with the information that I knew. We originally got a phone call from a woman who knew her, that was a pastor's wife, who had known her, who was on the board of a pregnancy center back in her previous hometown where she had lived. And she came forward and said, look, I don't know if you guys have vetted Jennifer's story, but she's a well-known fabricator, teller of tales. That's why she moved from the town that she was in. And somebody needs to vet her story because her story is not true. And we all know it's not true. This is why she moved. Somebody needs to figure this out and vet her story. I immediately thought, oh, this woman's lying. Like this is not true. Right. And
the woman who at first,
the woman who made
Jennifer
the
out.
allegations, I thought, oh, who would question this? Right. Like, so I defended her. I stood up for her. I told her, we will get you lawyers, to combat this slander. This is terrible. Right. And I had told her, look, you need to, but what you do need to do is, she'd always said that there was a police report, that she had access to the police report, that she had access to her medical records, all this stuff. And I said, look, Jennifer, what you do need to do is you need to have that police report available, because this happens, right? I mean, if you're a public figure, if you're a public speaker, if you're making these claims, you need to have something to back up your story. Right. I mean, I have my business card. I had my business card from when I was working at Planned Parenthood. Like, I have I said I was the employee of the year at Planned Parenthood. I have my award from when I was like, I said Planned Parenthood had quotas. I have my budget sheet proving there was quotas. Right. So, I mean, like, if you make a claim, you need to be able to sort of back it up. Right. And I said, so, not that anybody's going to ask for it, but you need to just have it available just in case. You need to have this police report. You need to have your medical records and all this. And she said, yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. Well, this woman ended up calling Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family was writing her book, ended up calling her speakers bureau, and they started requesting these records, which they have every reason to. I mean, Focus on the Family is publishing her book, for goodness sake, right? And so they just wanted some evidence to put it to bed and to be able to tell this woman, we've seen it. We've seen the police report. We've seen the records. You have nothing to stand on, so that they could back her up as well. She ended up saying that if she had to provide any records to anybody, that she was pulling out of the book deal.
That doesn't make any sense.
And that was a big red flag to me. And so, that's when I started to worry, like, am I betting on the wrong horse here? And so that was when we started doing a little bit of investigation. She had always said that a big part of her story was that, there was snow on the ground, there was a huge snowstorm, all this kind of stuff. She had said for 7 years that the rape had taken place on January 11th, 2014, in Wilmington, North Carolina. We looked at the dates. We looked at the weather. It was 72 degrees on January 11th.
Oh my gosh.
It had not snowed that day. The only day that it had snowed was on January 28th. And so we went to her with that information. She said, well, I must have gotten the date wrong. It must have been January 28th.
I don't know anyone that survives a traumatic. I'm just telling you, I don't know. And anyone who goes through a traumatic attack like that, whether that's rape or anything, like, you know the day that happened, like the smells in the air, what things looked like the noises around you, right? I mean, isn't that fair to say?
I mean, I was like, okay, like, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Like, maybe you didn't know trauma. I don't, maybe. Okay. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Okay. January 28th. That's okay. It happened January 28th. And so I said, okay, well, you know how you put this to bed? Just show the police report, right? Focus on the Family, the police report, show your speaking agency, the police report. No, not going to do it. Not going to do it. we found out that in the state of North Carolina, sexual assault records are not protected. And so all of that is public record. All police reports are public record. We ended up looking on January 28th. We ended up looking through the whole month of January. There was no police report in her name. There was no Jane Doe police report that matched any of her demographics. We ended up calling the police department, asking if there were any police reports in her name, any Jane Doe police reports that we were missing. They said, no, we have no record of her on file.
Abby, do you know the woman who faked being a 9/11 survivor, Tanya Head? Have you ever heard that story? It's called The Woman Who Wasn't There. Okay, there's a woman who made up this whole thing for years and years and years. She was the president of the 9/11 survivors, like association club or something like that. Like she made a whole persona about being this 9/11 survivor. The whole thing was fake. She wasn't even in the country at the time. This story is like similar to that, making up this entire story of going through a tragedy to make a bunch of money and get some fame and stuff. And then the whole thing isn't even true.
But that wasn't even it. So I was like, okay. So by this point, I'm like, okay, this is like getting crazy, right? There's no police report. There's no evidence of any of this. I'm like, okay. I'm like, Jennifer, what hotel? She said she got attacked at a hotel. I'm like, what hotel is it? This was 7 years ago. Surely there's somebody there that remembers this happening. I mean, this was a huge deal. You were found naked in a stairwell. Like somebody's going to remember that, right?
Right.
Like, give me the name of the hotel. We'll call the hotel. We'll verify. Would not give out the name of the hotel. Would not give any verifying information about it, still wouldn't give out the police report. She had given us an ultrasound that was, the dates were tampered with.
What?
And then admitted the dates were tampered with. She said that in her story, this is public information. This is not me telling anything that she hasn't made public. In her story, she said that during the attack, she had multiple fingers broken. She had multiple ribs broken. She said she had a subdural hematoma in her brain. She said that the guy had broken a glass bottle up her rectum. And so she had to have, it was very, very traumatic, very, very brutal, right? So she said that she found out that she was pregnant on a cruise that she was working on, she was interpreting ASL, American Sign Language. Okay. 2 weeks. Now it would be 2 weeks after the attack on a cruise. She found out she was pregnant 2 weeks later on a cruise after having a bottle broken up your rectum, a subdural hematoma in your brain, multiple fingers broken, multiple ribs broken. How are you using your hands interpreting ASL 2 weeks after multiple fingers were broken?
I don't think anything that you're like, I feel like the questions you're asking are super fair. It sounds like you've done extreme thorough research into this and you're asking fair questions. So I don't understand why
they won't answer the question. So now I became a villain because I was simply asking questions.
Why are people trying to cancel you for this?
Well, they just because you can't question a rape survivor. That's the thing, right? So you can't question anyone who says I've been raped. And it's really a sad thing that we're in our society, right? Like the Me Too has created this Me Too movement has like created this monster, right? Because the bottom line is that women do lie about being raped. We know that. And those women should be held accountable. And in the meantime, this woman has raised close to $100,000 from the pro-life movement on surgeries that never existed.
So where's the money going? That's what I want to know.
Where's the money? I mean, that's the thing. We looked up her criminal record. We did a background check on her. She has 16 criminal charges on her record.
No way.
Her husband has 30 criminal charges.
Holy crap. This could be like a massive con deal.
Like, what is going on? And I mean, it's so crazy. It's so ridiculous. And, but this group of people, and the saddest thing, Alex, is that this group of people that's like trying to cancel me now, which whatever, they can do what they want. This group of people, they are actually all assault survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman, Jennifer, has lured them in. And because she's faking this or whatever, she's she's got all this trauma or whatever. She has lured them in, and she is now exploiting their real trauma.
Right.
And that's the saddest thing to me. That's what makes me the most angry about it, is that she's using them.
Jennifer's story aside, why do you think there are some people in the pro-life movement that just do not like you?
I'm very mouthy. Let's just be honest.
Well, I think that there's two types of people, like in the pro-life movement. Okay, this is what I've noticed, and you've been involved in, or way more of an activist in the pro-life movement than me. I'm such a newbie to this world. But what I've noticed is that there's two people. There's like an Abby Johnson type or a Kristen Hawkins type, right? Which is like really aggressive, like balls to the wall, part of my French, but just like hard hitting. Here's the freaking truth. I don't care if it hurts your feelings. Abortion is murder types. Then you have like the Lila Rose, the Josh Brahms, who are like more like really soft and squishy and stuff, which is great too, but there's just total polar opposites. And so is there sort of like a competitive thing, not necessarily between those names I just mentioned, but just those types of styles? Is there a little bit of a competitive streak in the pro-life movement between like what's best for women?
I don't know. I feel like, I guess it's sort of like a love or hate sort of thing, with people like me or Kristen, like people, they either really love us or they really hate us. I think, okay, well, let me say this. I was much more liked in the pro-life movement before I came out and endorsed Trump. That made a lot of people dislike me, especially like the more liberal leaning pro-lifers. They hate my guts. So liberal leaning pro-life, which is fine. I don't have any use for them anyway. So because I'm like super conservative and, I'm not moderate at all. They don't have time for me. I don't have time for them. So I'm just like, I don't want to find common ground with you guys. I don't believe in BLM BS. I don't believe in any of that, Yeah. So I'm not going to try to find common ground with any of you guys. So they just dislike me just outright, which is fine. But I think on the whole, I think the pro-life movement, I think the bulk of the pro-life movement likes me. And I think they like the work that I do. It's a small group that does not like me, but I believe that they're more of like the fringe of the pro-life movement.
Is there a lot of infighting within the pro-life movement?
I don't think so. There used to be more than there is now.
That's good.
I think we have so many female leaders right now in the pro-life movement, and we all get along great. So I think like when there were a lot of like male leaders, there was like a lot of like this sort of like pissing contest. But now that there's like a lot of female leaders in the pro-life movement, like we all get along really great. We love each other. We have this big group text,
I love that.
Yeah. So we really get along really well. We're not trying to compete. Like we're really trying to help each other and help like push each other's organizations. And, what are you doing? How can I help? So.
The first time we met, you told me a story at dinner that had me on the edge of my seat. It was about this it was about this abortion clinic in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please tell us the story. You know which one I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, it was like one of the first speaking engagements I did, and I'm pretty sure it's for a group. I think it's called Life Institute now or something like that. And so I'd gone up there to tour their facility. I was speaking like for their fundraiser or something. And they were like, oh, stop by, our facility. It used to be an abortion clinic. So anyway, I was there, and so the facility used to be a synagogue. And then this abortionist bought it and turned the synagogue into an abortion clinic. And then, all of a sudden, just one day, he just like picked up and left. Nobody really knew. Nobody still knows like what happened. He just like picked up and left one day, left all the instruments there, left everything there. He just like picked up and moved out one day. So then this pro-life group ended up buying it and converting it into this like pro-life space. So anyway, they left one room as it was, like as like an abortion procedure room. People can go in there and like look at it and like look at the tools and all this kind of stuff, right? So anyway, so one day this lady was driving by, and this was after they had converted everything and whatever. So this lady was driving by. She gets out of her car. She goes in and she's like, hey, I just want to tell you, I drive by this building every day. And she said, I just want to thank you so much for taking down those hideous gargoyles that were at the top of the building. And they were like we didn't do anything to the outside of the building. Like we just renovated the inside. We didn't do anything to the outside. And she's like, yeah, you did. Like there were these gargoyles like at the top of each corner at the building. And they were like, no, ma'am, like we did not remove anything. And she's like, listen, I drive by here every single day on my way to work. And there were gargoyles perched on the corners of this building. And she's like, and now they're gone.
That is the spookiest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I know. So wait, but did I tell you about the inside though?
No.
When they did like mass inside the building. Okay. So they had a priest come. This is even crazier. So they had a priest come. My friend was there actually during mass. So this is like no crap. So they were in the building. They were like saying mass. They had a priest come. They were saying mass inside the building. And so they're like they're like at the part of the Eucharist, they're doing the Eucharist. And so the priest like holds up, like the wafer, like the host for consecration, and all the doors in the facility, this is same facility, all the doors in the facility like bust open.
No.
Yeah. And this like wind goes like through the halls. The back door opens up and then closes, slams shut.
Okay, this entire story, like this could be the premise for a new thriller movie.
I know, right? For like a friggin' novel or something, like scary movie. I know. So like all this stuff has happened like in that building. It's crazy.
See, this is what it's like whenever I'm with Abby is she tells me stuff like this. She'll just like all of a sudden she'll just be like, let me tell you about this. And that's what I love about you. You're full of all these like wild stories about the abortion industry.
I know. It's crazy. I know. And then like when he did the same thing, then like he did the same thing for like the wine, like he held it up and the same freaking thing happened.
Nope.
Like a wind went through the building, the back door like opened and like slammed shut.
Oh my gosh. I need like you to go and do a little docu-series or something about this place because there's just so many things happening there. I feel like we need to talk about it. It's fascinating. Okay, two more questions for you and then we'll wrap up. We went a little long, but that's okay. You've had great stories today. You also told me about how you were working towards becoming a Christian counselor, I believe. Is that still a thing?
Yeah. So, so I am. So I am a Christian counselor. I'm licensed by the National Christian Counseling Association, and then I'm actually getting my doctorate. And so I don't really know why, but I'm doing it just to do it. And yeah, I like it. And I like being a Christian counselor because I can talk about abortion. I can talk about my faith. I can, and I don't have to worry about, like a state licensing board coming down on me and being like, you can't talk about your faith. You can't talk about abortion.
Do you think it makes a difference for somebody, whether they choose like a secular therapist or a Christian therapist, or is it all the same, or is there
it makes a huge difference. And I can tell you, I think the latest stats I saw was something like secular counseling only, something like secular counseling, don't quote me on this, but something like secular counseling only works like, it was something like, I don't know, it was like 5 to 10% of the time. Christian counseling works like 93% of the time.
Do you think, okay, this is like kind of a therapy conspiracy theory a little bit. Do you think that secular therapists, like they really don't want you to actually get better because then you'd stop coming and then they would stop making money, or is that totally false?
I mean, I think there's some truth to that, like especially just sort of like talk therapists. I mean, like let me just say this. If you've been with a therapist for like years and years and years, stop going. I mean, I would say if you've been to the same therapist and you're not making progress and you've been with them for over a year, you need to find a new therapist.
That's
like,
huge.
You should not be in therapy forever and ever and ever. Like the point of therapy is to go with a problem, make some goals, finish those goals, move on. Like the point of therapy is not to be in unending therapy.
It just seems like it's become now this massive business model, and people want to see the same, I don't know what you call it, patients, clients, or whatever for like 10 plus years. And when I hear that, I'm like, bro, what you're doing is not working. Exactly what you're saying.
Right. Right. And I mean, there are some people who are like, I just don't have like a support system. And so like my therapist is my support system. Okay. That's one thing.
They're like friends.
But like most people go to therapy because they have a problem in their life that they're trying to work through. And if your therapist is just like perpetuating that problem, like for like a year and you're not actually seeing results, then that therapist is not the therapist for you. And you need to find another one that can actually help you move through that crisis and move through that problem.
I love that. We should do a whole nother episode just on therapy because I think that's a fascinating subject. Your nonprofit, And Then There Were None, is really neat because you help women working in the abortion industry leave. What does And Then There Were None provide them so they can leave the abortion industry?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty comprehensive. So we do everything. We provide them transitional financial help so that they can leave the industry like that day, the day they decide they don't want to work there anymore. We're like, well, then get out. We'll help you pay your bills, whatever, until you get a new job. We have recruiters on staff with us that help them land a new job, help them find a new job, new employment. We have a professional resume writer on staff that can help them write their resume, update their resume, whatever they need. We also help them. We have licensed professional counselors on staff that help them. A lot of the workers that leave have pretty serious post-traumatic stress disorder. So we help them work through that. Spiritual support, emotional support, whatever they need. We're there to help them. It's really comprehensive.
And in a couple weeks, you have a new book coming out. Could you talk about the new book?
Yeah, it's called Fierce Mercy. It's coming out March 1st. You can pre-order it now on Amazon and I guess other places, but just do it on Amazon. It's cheaper. And it's really, I wanted to do sort of a follow-up to Unplanned, but I didn't want it to just be about like pro-life stuff. I really wanted it to reach a broader audience. And I feel like our society is really in need of mercy in our own lives. And then showing how do we show mercy to other people that we encounter. And, God has been so good to me, like showing me mercy every single day of my life. And so I wanted to just sort of talk about that and tell about that. And then just practical ways that I've learned how to show mercy to some of our most vulnerable populations.
I love that. So Amazon, and what's the name of the book again?
Fierce Mercy.
Fierce Mercy. And where can people find you on social media if they want to just follow you? And then where can they get involved with And Then There Were None?
Yeah, they can. I'm on all the major social media platforms. Abby Johnson, and my website's just abbyj.com, abbyj.com. You can click there and find all my social media platforms too. I also have a podcast called Politely Rude. You can find that on all the, wherever you get your social media, your podcast.
Perfect name, by the way. Perfect name for you.
My husband always said I was politely rude. So I was like, oh, that's a good name for a podcast.
But I like that because you know what? I think politely rude is also just a synonym for like, don't back down and use your voice. And that's my favorite thing about you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, you can also get my books on my website and my other 2 books that are out, and, all things. And Then There Were None. And then my other ministry that helps women in crisis, single parents in crisis, all that is called Loveline. You can go to loveline.com, find out more about that and how you can help.
Abby, I so appreciate you hanging out with us on the Spillover today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Everyone needs to share this episode so people learn the truth about what Planned Parenthood's agenda really is from someone who used to be one of the top directors in their organization. Now is not the time to be silent about abortion. There are so many issues where it's like, okay, let's have a conversation about this, but not with this. There is no room to debate the lives of our most innocent members of society. Sorry, not sorry. There's just no excuse, not ever and not now. And there are no words like healthcare that can put a bow on top of murder. I hear so many young women who claim to be progressive. They put on their little pink hats and they yell, "Yay, women!" But then they advocate for a death sentence that impacts women. Newsflash. If you've bought into Planned Parenthood's message, you're being lied to. I hope this conversation with Abby Johnson solidified that in your mind today. If you really stand against abortion, it means actively supporting not only the unborn babies, but the women who are facing the life-changing experience of motherhood. Both women and their babies need to be rallied around now more than ever. And it starts when all of you speak out on their behalf. Good talk, team. All right. I'm feeling hype. Are you feeling hype? We need a little huddle. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, but before you go, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. Let me know if you're like Abby. You used to be pro-choice, but now you stand for life. And what you thought of this episode, what you think of Abby Johnson. I don't believe that people are irredeemable. Just like Abby, you can change your mind about this issue. So change someone's mind. Share this episode everywhere with everyone, your kid's swim teacher, to your neighbor, or your sorority sister. My goal is to get this pro-life conversation to the top of the charts. How incredible would that be to have this episode just rocket to the top of society and culture? New episodes of The Spillover drop every Thursday at 9 p.m. Pacific and midnight Eastern on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can watch this interview by subscribing to Politics on YouTube. I'm Alex Clark, and this is The Spillover. Love you. Mean it. Bye. Big dog status, I'm a big dog vet. I pull up on the block in a big Corvette. Ride around the city with a stick all black. Try with a stroke, but we with all that.
How much does the earth cost? I'm gonna buy the entire earth.
Yo, it's Jon Root coming up next on TPUSA Live. Tune into the newest episode of Politics, where host Alex Clark spills the tea on Euphoria's drug problem. Apparently, rose gold is no longer trendy. She shares her Freak of the Week and so much more pop culture without the propaganda. Next on Politics.
And why aren't you in uniform?
He ate.
I was not expecting that.
Yes, we are talking about Euphoria today. Dolly Parton revealed her secrets for keeping her marriage spicy, and I'm dead. There's a new fashion item that Gen Z has deemed out of style, and never in a million years was I expecting to say that Donald Trump and this celebrity hung out. That is gonna be our Freak of the Week. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Politics. Euphoria on HBO Max has quickly become to Gen Z what Skins was to millennials.
I really like you.
I like you too, Cassie.
I like you more. Ew.
Most high schools have crazy sock day, but Euphoria kids are turning trans and hooking up with old men.
First of all, ew. Second of all, ew.
Maybe teens and college-age kids love this show so much because it's so far from reality. Or maybe it's really close to it. No, I'm just kidding. The mom conservative's almost passed out right there. Don't worry, it's all fantasy.
You better be joking.
What I think is funny is DARE's back. You know, the program that millennials grew up with in school trying to keep us from doing drugs. Well, DARE, D-A-R-E, has risen from the grave to publicly criticize Euphoria for glorifying teen drug use and sex. Remember when high schoolers on TV looked like Drake in a wheelchair and Miley Cyrus in cowboy boots? Yeah, well, now they look like they're hanging out at Drake's trap house with Miley's We Can't Stop playing on repeat. Have you ever wondered what the secret to a happy marriage is? Dolly Parton says she has kept her 55-year-old marriage to her mysterious husband, Carl, spicy by always looking good at home and making him breakfast in a Playboy bunny suit.
I'm the bunny mother.
Dolly said, every day I put on some makeup and fix my hair because I think, well, the whole world, I'm out here and everybody else sees me all dressed up and I'm not going to just kind of go home and just flop on him. That was my Dolly Parton voice. Too bad I don't got those knockers.
My breasts would have been bigger, but I had an eating disorder in year 8, so they didn't develop properly.
If you're a married conservative, or even if you're dating, do you try to always be dressed up with makeup on around your significant other, or did that ship sail a long time ago?
Did you put shoe polish on your eyes? I never understand you women. God, eyeshadow, man. That's makeup? I would take that off. That looks crazy.
Okay, this is seriously gonna trigger some of you. According to Gen Z, rose gold is out.
No, you can't do that to me.
Fashion influencer and blogger Kathleen Post has a rose gold engagement ring, and Gen Z dragged her on TikTok telling her it's totally out of style, outdated, and ugly. Of course, they said chuggy. They said not only is the rose gold atrocious, but so is the halo style for engagement rings. Can someone just vote Gen Z off the island already? But now I have to ask, how do you feel about rose gold and halo rings? In or out?
What are you wearing?
Oh no, Trumpy Trump is the freak of the week.
I said certified freak.
Freak.
7 days a week.
Never in a million years did I picture former President Trump and this C-lister hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. And yet, here we are. It's Ray J. Ray J!
Sexy, can I just pardon my manners?
Yes, Ray J, as in Kim Kardashian's ex that she made the sex tape with, who has been trying to grift off her ever since.
Le who? The her.
According to Page 6, Ray J sat down with Trump to discuss initiatives that he would like to execute for entrepreneurs and young business professionals, as well as to help raise awareness for various political issues that he's passionate about, like job creation, encouraging small business development, and how information technology plays an important role in the future of our economy.
Girlfriend! Girlfriend! Hey! 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 Girlfriend! Woo!
I feel like it's always been Trump's Achilles heel to just get really excited about being accepted by any celebrity, even though I personally don't think Ray J is anyone to be excited about.
Did you feel betrayed by it?
I felt humiliated. I felt like...
You know there are people who say that you put it out yourself. You know that.
Yeah. And, you know, I think why would anyone put that humiliation on their family like that?
Because what were you worried about most, yourself or your family?
My family. I think the fact that everything that our family does is a reflection on the other people. I mean, I've always been concerned about the family, humiliating the family, and that's what I did. You know, and that's something that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life and have to explain to my children one day. Imagine that conversation I had to have with my grandmother.
My interview with Abby Johnson, pro-life speaker, author, and former top director for Planned Parenthood is out now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to The Spillover to listen. I ask her to explain the truth about how Planned Parenthood operates behind closed doors, why some people in the pro-life movement don't like her and want to cancel her, plus the differences between seeing a regular therapist and a Christian one. This episode is definitely going to shock your feminist friends who love Planned Parenthood and think that they just provide health care for women. Make sure you leave a 5-star review and then share a link to this episode in your group chats and on your stories. Heart this episode, Euphoria. Are you watching it? Also, President Trump hanging with Ray J. Weird? Weird, right? DM this episode to someone who loves Euphoria and tap the save button. We're back Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. It's pop culture without the propaganda every single day. I'm Alex Clark, and I'm wearing a play suit. And this is Politics.
Get 'em up.
Support Politics, the first ever conservative pop culture daily show, by subscribing to our channel, turning on notifications, and of course, hitting the thumbs up. Also, our main home is on Instagram. Seriously, just trust me, that's where the real magic happens. Follow us there at Politics.